Welcome to Creepy Vibes. Highway 277 in Texas has a strange reputation. Not haunted in the traditional way, no ghosts waving from windows, but something's off. People report weird things with time, memory, and light. It's like the road decides what you remember and what you don't. Tonight, we're going through 20 disturbing incidents locals swear actually happened on this stretch of highway. They're not big headline stories. They're the kind that slip between reality and something darker. You ready? But before we begin, here's something strange. Most viewers make one huge mistake: they leave without subscribing. And by doing so, they miss out on the creepiest, spine-tingling tales that only the bravest dare to hear. Don't be one of them. Hit that subscribe button now, because tonight's just the beginning, and the terror waiting in the darkness is far from over. Where are you watching from? And what time is it there? Let me know in the comments, because here, the night is only getting started, and the horror is waiting to unfold. Now, let's dive into the darkness. Marcus Dean didn't believe in ghost stories. He'd seen worse. 2 tours in Afghanistan. A divorce that split his life down the middle. Enough sleepless nights to memorize every wrinkle in the ceiling of 1,000 cheap motels. So when he took the midnight freight run from Laredo to Abilene, it wasn't fear he felt, just fatigue. A heavy, bone-deep kind. The kind that makes your eyes water and your thoughts smear at the edges. He was somewhere between Eagle Pass and Del Rio. When the world went strange, Highway 277 was dead quiet, just like he liked it. Empty stretches, no headlights ahead or behind, only the hum of the engine and the soft static of the CB radio that hadn't picked up a clear voice in hours. The desert on both sides stretched out black and empty, like God had forgotten to finish painting the world. No wind, no insects. Just silence so thick you could chew it. The dashboard clock. Read 2:12 a.m. Marcus rubbed his eyes with one hand and kept the other steady on the wheel. He wasn't tired enough to pull over, just that itchy kind of worn down where you start. To question if the world outside your windshield is really moving, or if you're just trapped in a long, rolling movie that never ends. And then it happened. A blink, that's all it was. A long, heavy blink. When he opened his eyes, the road looked the same. Same faded yellow lines, same black void of brush and mesquite, same cracked horizon. But something was off. The kind of off you feel in your bones before your brain catches. Up. The dashboard clock still read 2:12 a.m. But his GPS chirped softly. A direction marker. A change in route. The little blue triangle showing his truck had moved nearly 10 miles from where he remembered last being. He hadn't taken a turn, hadn't passed a sign, hadn't felt a thing. He gripped the wheel tighter, clicked the high beams on and off. Nothing out there. No detour, no memory lapse, no explanation. His heart started to pick up. He checked his rear view. Darkness. Pulled up the dashcam feed, flipping through the footage on the in-cabin screen. The recording was running, time-stamped and all. But from 2:12 to 2:39, it was just him sitting there, motionless. Hands on the wheel, eyes wide, unblinking, staring directly at the road ahead like a wax figure in a museum. And he didn't remember any of it. Not a sound. Not a shift in thought. Just nothing. He tapped the feedback. Forward. Same frame. Over and over, his pale face locked forward. The faint glow of the instrument panel painting his features in corpse light. Marcus turned. Off the playback. Sat in silence for a long moment. Then laughed. A dry, short sound that didn't reach his chest. Jesus, he muttered. Just tired, but he didn't believe it. Not really. He pulled into the next gravel shoulder, stepped outside into the dry air, and lit a cigarette. His boots crunched on the dirt. The stars looked wrong. Not cloudy, just unfamiliar. Like the sky had shifted just enough to make him feel like a visitor in his own world. Then came the sound. Faint at first. Like wind across metal. But it wasn't wind. It was breathing. Slow, steady, heavy breathing. Not from him and not from the open land, but from the truck, from the cab. The engine was off. The lights were off. But something, some presence, was exhaling from inside the truck like it had just run a mile. Marcus stepped back slowly, his cigarette falling from his lips and dying in the dust. The breathing stopped. He yanked open the door. Nothing. Cab was empty. The inside smelled of leather, grease, and something faintly off, like burned plastic and cold sweat. He sat back in, shut the door, and started the engine. The truck didn't start on the first try or the second. Third time, it turned over. But the radio came alive, screaming static, and through it, he heard his own name, whispered once, sharp and wet, like someone speaking from the other side of glass. Marcus. He shut it off, didn't turn it back on again. He drove the rest of the stretch in silence, the headlights cutting through the empty night like a scalpel through cloth. By the time he pulled into the freight yard outside Abilene, it was nearly 6:30 a.m., sun coming up, birds starting to chirp, civilization slowly pulling itself out of sleep. He uploaded the footage to his company server, filed his route sheet, and said nothing. Not a word, but 3 days later, a supervisor called. "You feeling all right, Dean?" The man said over the phone, "That footage from the other night, the one from the 212 gap, that's not normal." Marcus said nothing. "There's a glitch," the man continued, "but it's not the file. We ran diagnostics. The video plays fine. It's just you. You're not blinking. Not once. For 27 minutes. Not even when a fly lands on your cheek." Marcus hung up. He hasn't driven Highway 277 since, and late at night, in whatever motel he's found himself in, when he dares to play that footage again, he swears his reflection in the screen blinks back at him, but not in sync. It was just past midnight when Ed Carlisle pulled off Highway 277 to gas up at a rusted-out station that hadn't seen fresh pavement or a working icebox since Reagan was president. The kind of place that had 2 flickering bulbs and 1 working pump, and even that one screamed in pain when it started churning. But Ed wasn't there for gas. Not really. He hadn't needed to stop. The tank was 3/4 full, and he hadn't had a cigarette in 12 years. What he needed was silence. A kind of silence the road just couldn't give. The hum of tires, even the whisper of wind rolling off the desert plain, it all buzzed too loud in his ears now. Ever since retirement, the world had gotten noisy. In the wrong ways. He pulled into the last bay, parked under the weak amber light, and leaned back in his seat. The old Crown Vic, the one he refused to trade even after he handed in his badge, ticked softly as the engine cooled. He could still hear the leather seats crack when he moved, still smell the faint residue of blood and oil in the floor mats. No matter how much lemon spray he'd used, that's when he heard the knock, sharp. From the rear. Knock. A single, firm tap against metal, not the roof, not the window, the trunk. Ed didn't move at first. He just sat, watching the rearview mirror. Like it might tell him something. The desert wind rattled the tin sign above the station, and the neon open flickered like a dying heartbeat. Then it came again. Knock. Same rhythm. A deliberate beat, like someone who wanted to be heard but wasn't in a hurry. Ed slid his hand under the seat, felt the cold grip of the .38 he hadn't officially turned in, and stepped out. The desert night was colder than he remembered it being. The kind of cold that made your gums ache when you breathed. He walked around the car, his boots crunching gravel, and stared down at the trunk like it was a coffin. He hesitated, then popped it. The trunk yawned open slowly, the hydraulic arm squealing like something being tortured. Inside was nothing. The emergency kit, the jumper cables, a rusted jack. The same garbage that had been there for a decade. No girl, no body. Not even a footprint on the lining. He stood there for a while, just staring at it, waiting for something to move, something to explain the knock. But the only sound now was the wind and the low groan of the dying pump island behind him. He closed the trunk. It thudded shut with finality, but the echo of the knock still bounced around in his skull. Back in the driver's seat, he cursed his age, maybe even his guilt. He glanced at the mirror out of habit. That's when he saw her barefoot, hair soaked and stringy like she'd been pulled from a ditch, standing behind his seat, inside the car, her face pale, smeared with something dark. Not quite blood, not quite mud. Eyes wide, empty, and staring right at him. Then she raised her hand. Knock. 2 soft raps on the inside of the rear windshield. Ed's body locked up. He didn't even scream. He turned around in a jerk, the kind that makes your back seize up, but the back seat was empty. Nothing. No footprints, no damp stains. Just his worn seat cover and the tattered atlas he kept stuffed in the side pocket. He sat there breathing hard, heart hammering. The pain in his chest told him it wasn't a hallucination. That girl had been real as the knocks, as real as the stain she left on his mirror, a smudge of something brown-red, oily like dried tears or motor grease. He drove. No direction, just forward. Past the station, down the black strip of 277 that never seemed to end. Every so often, he'd glance at the mirror, half expecting her face to show again, half praying it would. Because deep down, Ed knew something. That girl. She wasn't new. 20-3 years ago, when he was still wearing the badge, they found a car abandoned 2 miles from where he'd just stopped. Trunk wide open, keys still in the ignition, but no driver. Just a pair of women's shoes on the back seat. He remembered the smell. Gasoline and wet leaves. He remembered how the ground had been soft from the rain the night before, yet there weren't any footprints leading away. Nothing. Like the girl had vanished into the air. Her name had been Dana Bryce, just 19, driving home from college to see her mother in Del Rio. She'd never made it, and no one ever found her. Ed had closed the case quietly, called it voluntary disappearance. But he never believed it, because 3 nights after the car was found, his cruiser's trunk had refused to stay shut. Every time he'd slam it, it would pop again. And then the knocking started. He never told anyone. Who'd believe a sheriff hearing ghost knocks? But he started avoiding that stretch of road, let his deputies take those calls. And over time, it faded, like a nightmare you don't want to remember but still smell in your sheets. But now here he was, retired, alone, and she was back. The road narrowed. No other cars, just miles of darkened sand and silence. Ed tried to focus, tried to steady his breath. But something had shifted in the air, a pressure like being underwater. The steering wheel twitched in his grip. He realized the car was slowing on its own. He stepped on the gas. No response. Then the radio flicked on, static at first. Then a girl's voice, soft and wet with static. "Let me out." Ed slammed the power button. Silence. He didn't know what was real anymore. The air inside the car felt dense now, humid, like swamp breath. His windows fogged from the inside. He wiped the windshield with his sleeve, but the fog clung back like skin. Then she was there again, not behind him this time. Beside him. In the passenger seat. Staring. Her eyes no longer wide, now narrowed. Sad, angry. Her mouth moved slowly, lips cracking. "You never looked?" Ed screamed, not from fear, but something deeper. Guilt. He'd known she was there, maybe not in the trunk, but in the silence. In the evidence he didn't follow. In the mother's tears he ignored when she begged for a second search. He never looked. The car stopped middle of nowhere. The headlights flickered, then died. The air went still. Not a whisper of wind. Then, from behind him, knock. He didn't turn. Couldn't, she whispered, right against his ear now. Open it. His hand moved on its own, reached under the seat, found the trunk latch, pulled. He stepped out, legs numb, mind far away. The trunk was already open, waiting. Inside wasn't empty anymore. There was a girl curled in the fetal position, hair soaked, skin pale, lips blue. Her bare feet dirty and scratched. She looked peaceful, like she'd been sleeping for years. Ed dropped to his knees. He heard the wind again, but it was crying now. A soft sob in the sand. He sat there, unmoving, until dawn broke across the highway. When the trooper found him hours later, Ed was gone. Not dead, just gone. Car still running. Trunk still open. A smudge on the rearview mirror. And 2 knocks etched into the glass from the inside. The girl was never found again, but the trunk still opens itself. And on quiet nights, parked on that stretch of Highway 277, some say they hear a 2 knock. The car coughed once, sputtered like an old smoker gasping for one last breath, and died right there on the shoulder of Highway 59, a few miles shy of a forgotten way station that looked like it hadn't seen life in a decade. For a second, there was peace, just the quiet, the kind of silence that lets your mind wander a little too far into places it shouldn't go. Then the dashboard lights blinked off. The radio died. The GPS froze. Everything dead. Jesus Christ, muttered Jared. His voice hushed like he didn't want to wake something nearby. Molly turned in the passenger seat, pulling her cardigan tighter over her chest. You didn't check the fuel? I did. We had a quarter tank. I swear to God, it's not the fuel. Jared turned the key again. The engine made a sad, dry click, like something hollow and mechanical pretending to be alive. The battery hadn't even given the courtesy of a goodbye. Molly reached for her phone. I'll call AA. He watched her screen light up and he saw it before she said anything. 317, she said. What? Look, she held the phone toward him. The time? It's 3:17. It was 3:17 15 minutes ago when we pulled over. Jared blinked and looked down at the dash clock. Same thing. 3:17 a.m. He glanced at the wristwatch he'd worn every day for 6 years. The second hand ticked once, and then froze. 3:17 a.m. Okay, he said, trying for calm and landing somewhere between denial and full-blown dread. That's weird. Probably just the car system glitching and syncing everything. Probably. It's my phone, Jared. That's not. The car system. Maybe we're in some weird cell-dead zone. Time's just not updating. She stared at him. That's not how time works. He swallowed and stared through the windshield toward the pale green building just off the road, the old way station. The windows were all boarded up, but not recently. The paint had flaked to dust and the lot was overgrown with yellow. Grass that looked dead even in the moonlight. It reminded him of an abandoned church. Something sacred turned sour. Like if you got close enough, you'd hear prayers whispered backward. We're not walking back, Molly said. No way. No. He agreed. We wait until sunrise. What time is sunrise? Jared didn't answer, because there was no time. Not anymore. Not beyond 3:17. That's when they heard the first sound. Crunch. Not loud, not fast, just deliberate. Something stepping in dry grass, slowly, too slowly. Molly sat up straight, looking at him with wide eyes. Did you hear that? He didn't answer. He was listening. Really listening. Crunch. Again. Closer. Slow. As if the thing, person, was dragging their feet on purpose. Or walking with something broken. Jared reached for the driver's side window control. Dead, of course. Molly locked her door manually. It's probably an animal. That's not a coyote. He whispered. Crunch. It circled around the rear of the car. He flicked on the headlights. Nothing. Just empty road and dry weeds, glowing faintly in the artificial light. Hello? He called, loud and sharp. Who's there? No response. He turned off the lights again, thinking maybe they could see whoever, whatever, better in the dark. Sometimes light blinds you more than it reveals. That's when he saw the shape, reflected in the side mirror, faint, pale, and just there enough to set your nerves on fire. A person, maybe. Tall, too thin, no movement. No features. Just a silhouette. Standing 10 feet from the passenger side in the dead weeds. He blinked, and it was gone. Molly was already crying, one hand over her mouth. Jared, please, start the car. He didn't tell her it wasn't just the car that wasn't working. It was everything. There was no world outside 317. No phones. No clocks. No time. Only them. And the steps started again. Closer this time. Circling. He opened the glove box and pulled out the little pocket knife he kept for fishing trips. It was dull, nearly useless, but it made him feel like he was doing something. The mirror showed nothing now, but he could feel it. That old instinct humans used to survive when they still huddled in caves. The feeling of being watched. He pressed his hand against the window. Cold, colder than it should have been for a Texas night in July. That's when the glass fogged up, not from the inside. Two prints appeared in the condensation. Small hands, bare, pressing gently against the window pane. Then came the knock. Twice. Soft, slow, deliberate. Molly screamed. Jared turned the key one more time, knowing it wouldn't work. Then came the second knock. Not on the window. On the roof. Tap. Tap. They both froze. Breath held. Eyes wide. The silence stretched again, thick as mud. Then came the breathing. Shallow, wheezy. Just above them. Like someone crawling along the roof, face pressed low to hear their fear better. Something scraped metal. Nails? Teeth? He wanted to open the door and run. He wanted to scream. But the thing is, you don't move when you're prey, you wait. You don't make a sound. Time didn't move either. Still 317. Finally, the pressure on the roof eased. Then, crunch. Back in the grass again. Circling. Slower now. Like it was waiting. They sat like statues. He didn't know how long. Could have been 10 minutes. Could have been 10 hours. There was no way to know. Eventually, the footsteps stopped. Molly whispered, "Is it gone?" He didn't answer. Her phone buzzed. They both jumped. One new message. No number. Just a TIMESTAMP. 3:17 a.m. The message simply read, "Come out." The radio came back to life. Faint static. Then music. Haydn's Requiem. Molly started sobbing. Jared felt something warm run down his wrist. He'd gripped the knife so tight it cut into his palm. The lights on the dash flickered, then glowed again. He turned the key and the engine started. The clock jumped to 3:18. Just like that. Like it never happened. The music cut. The headlights flared and the road ahead was clear. He drove. Fast. No talking. No music. Just the roar of tires and the soft clicking of the bloody knife in the cup holder. They didn't stop until they reached a truck stop in Corrigan. The attendant stared at them. "Y'all look like hell," he said. Jared only asked one thing. "What time is it?" The man checked his watch. 3:17. Jared's voice cracked. "AM?" The man frowned. "No, PM. You sure you're okay?" They were not okay. They never would be again. Because when Molly opened her phone, she had one missed voicemail from a number that didn't exist. And in it, you could hear a little girl whispering, "We waited." And then, 2 soft knocks, just before the line went dead. He didn't even want to be on the road that night. His name was Hal McRae, 58 years old, divorced and dog-tired. He'd just buried his last living uncle down in Laredo, and now he was crawling his way north up Highway 83, bound for San Angelo. The plan was to stop at a cheap motel in Carrizo Springs and knock out for the night. But plans don't mean much on roads like that, especially after sunset, when the sky darkens like bruised fruit and the land forgets the rules of time. Hal had passed. Katerina maybe 20 minutes back, or at least he thought he had, and that stretch north was nothing but flat scrubland and telephone poles. He didn't see another car, not even a tail light blinking out in the distance. Just the kind of lonely blacktop that starts whispering to a man's mind if he doesn't keep it busy. The first time he saw the sign, it was simple enough, a faded green highway marker barely lit by his high beams with cracked white letters that read, Carrizo Springs to 8 miles. He didn't think much of it, just a reminder that a bed wasn't far. But 20 minutes later, it appeared again. Same color, same rusted bolts, same cracked corner at the top right. Carrizo Springs to 8 miles. He blinked hard and leaned forward over the wheel like he could peer through the mistake. Maybe he'd read it wrong the first time. Maybe the last one said 10 miles and he was just getting closer. Except his gut tugged at him. That's strange. Hollow tug you feel in a nightmare right before something steps out of the shadows. He slowed the truck a little, just in case. Turned down the radio, which had been playing some scratchy Tejano station since before Laredo. It fuzzed out as he turned the dial, then went silent. Just static. He left it that way. The land around him looked the same, mesquite, thorny scrub, the occasional low-hanging telephone wire. No buildings, no lights, not even a farmhouse. And Hal knew damn well that between Katerina and Carrizo, you at least passed the La Pryor exit and a Shell station. He hadn't seen a thing. That was when it came again. 30-5 minutes after. The last, maybe 40, just as his headlights climbed a small slope of gravel shoulder. There it was, Carrizo Springs to 8 miles. Same chipped paint. Same bent lower frame like it had been hit once and never repaired. Same eerie tilt to the right. And this time, Hal's breath hitched. He knew roads. He drove too many of them during the oil boom to count. And he knew he hadn't circled back. He hadn't turned around. He hadn't stopped. His phone had no signal. He checked twice. The darkness was starting to get heavy now, not just thick, but strange. The moon had gone behind a cloud, or maybe just disappeared altogether. It wasn't cloudy out, though. It was clear before, dry and crisp. But now the stars were gone too, as if someone had switched off the sky. There was just road and dirt and the thrum of his tires rolling into the same loop. He kept driving. His knuckles were white on the wheel, sweat on the back of his neck. He tried to remember how many miles had passed since Katerina. Had it really been more than an hour? 2? His dash clock blinked 9:47 p.m., just like it had earlier. He tapped it. Nothing changed. That's when the truck started to slow on its own. He pressed the gas. It didn't respond. The RPM stayed steady, hovering low. The headlights flickered, then held. No warning lights on the dash. Engine sounded fine, but it coasted like it was moving through thick syrup, like the road itself didn't want him to leave. And then came the third sign. It emerged from the dark like an old friend you never wanted to see again. A warped, broken green sign, half covered in dust. Carrizo Springs to 8 miles. Hal let out a sound somewhere between a grunt and a prayer. He pulled over, killed the engine. Silence fell like a blanket. He opened the door, stepped out. Dry dirt crunched under his boots. The air didn't move. No wind, no chirping insects. No distant hum of traffic. Just the hollow quiet that lives in abandoned places. He walked up to the sign, stared at it. Up close, the letters were wrong. Not printed wrong, no, they were spelled right. But the paint had strange stains on it. Not rust. Not moss. Darker. Something sticky. It looked like dried blood. He stepped back. Behind the sign was just black. No fence, no field, no stars. He squinted, trying to make out the edge of the landscape. There was none. It just ended, like the desert had been erased. Hal turned fast and got back in the truck, slammed the door shut and cranked the ignition. The engine rumbled, but the lights were dim. He didn't care. He floored it. The tires spun once, then caught, and he bolted forward. For a while, he didn't breathe. Just drove, fast. 10 minutes, then 20, then 30. Still the same scrub. Same flat, no exits, no buildings. Then the sign, Carrizo Springs to 8 miles. This time, Hal screamed, loud. A long, cracked wail of disbelief and rage and fear. He pounded the dash. The truck veered slightly. He corrected it with shaking hands. He looked down, his dash clock. Now read 9:47 p.m. Again. He reached for his phone. The screen lit up, then glitched, jumped like static. Then a map opened. GPS. Blue dot blinking. It wasn't on a road. It was just floating in gray. No route, no names, no towns. The dot blinked once, then turned red. Hal dropped the phone. He didn't stop driving. He couldn't. Something told him that stopping would be worse. That if he stopped again, something might climb in. From the shoulder. From the black. From behind the sign, he pressed on. Eventually, hours later, or maybe just minutes, he saw light. Not the green sign. Not the reflection of his own headlights on an old post. No, this was different. A small diner. Neon light buzzing in the distance. Faint hum. A pickup parked outside. A trucker fueling up. Hal pulled in like a man possessed. Nearly clipped the curb. He stumbled out, legs shaking. The trucker looked over, raised a brow. "You all right, man?" Hal stared at him, then looked back over his shoulder, out toward the black road. It was gone. The sign was gone. The empty highway was gone. Just a normal road now. Normal sky, moon overhead, stars blinking soft. He turned back to the man. His voice croaked when he spoke. Where am I?" The trucker sipped his coffee. "About 5 miles south of Carrizo Springs. Long drive?" Hal nodded slowly, then didn't speak again for a long time. And though he eventually made it to San Angelo and lived another 8 years, he never took Highway 83 again. Never drove at night, and never, ever looked at another green sign without feeling something cold at the base of his spine. Because deep down, in some part of him that never fully came back, he knew the road hadn't let him go. It just ... got tired of him. The heat sat heavy over the stretch of Highway 277 just south of Del Rio, a kind of suffocating late July weight that blurred the horizon and made the tar on the road ripple like it was alive. The wind was restless, dry, with a sharp metallic. tang that sometimes rolled in off the distant brush. Jesse and Maria Harper were coming back from visiting Maria's mother in Eagle Pass, their two boys snoring in the back seat of the old Suburban. The family had made this drive dozens of times over the years, long enough to know every billboard, every crooked mile marker, and every strange story whispered in diners between Junction and the border town's dot. It was about 4:30 in the afternoon. When the Harley shot past them, Jesse was doing a steady 65, trying to baby the old SUV's radiator. They were cruising just north of a dry arroyo, no turnoffs, no gas stations, just hard South Texas flatland and creosote shrubs when the sound hit them. A low, guttural roar, deep and angry, tore through the thick air behind them. Jesse barely had time to glance in the rear view before the blur of black chrome flashed alongside, kicking dust up against the windows as it passed. "Jesus," Jesse muttered, tightening his grip on the wheel. "Guys flying." Maria, who'd been half dozing in the passenger seat, blinked awake. "What the hell was that?" "Harley. Big one. Looked like an electric glide, maybe. Thing was loaded up like he's running cross-country." "Idiot," she muttered, adjusting her sunglasses. "You don't ride like that out here. He's gonna kill himself." Jesse didn't respond. He just watched the disappearing silhouette of the biker vanish into the shimmering distance ahead, that guttural engine notes slicing through the wind until it slowly began to fade. Only it didn't fade right. It didn't trail off the way engines normally do, swallowed up by distance. It stuck around, clinging to the wind like a whisper on loop. 3 minutes later, they saw the skid marks. Jesse's eyes narrowed, and he tapped the brakes. "That's weird," he said, easing the Suburban into the shoulder gravel. The marks weren't long, maybe 8 feet. A hard dark streak across the middle of the southbound lane, then nothing. Just nothing. No curve off the road. Number: busted guardrail. No ditch or embankment torn up. The line stopped in the dead center of the highway, like someone had slammed the brakes hard and then vanished. Mid-dash slide. Jesse opened the door and stepped out into the thick heat. The wind blew, dry and low, like a breath from something old and tired. He walked up to the skid, crouched beside it, ran his fingers over the rubber tracks. "Still warm," he muttered to himself. Maria got out too, shielding her eyes as she stepped up beside him. "Where's the wreck?" she asked. "Theirs." "No wreck? No body? Nope. No bike?" He stood up slowly, brushing his hands against his jeans. "Just these tracks. Look, see? They just end." The boys stirred in the back seat but didn't wake up. The wind blew again, and both Jesse and Maria turned instinctively toward the sound, even though there was nothing to see. Just the empty highway, the scorched brush on both sides, and the faint, persistent hum that hovered just under the breeze, like the Harley's engine was still out there, somewhere, circling them. "Do you hear that?" Maria whispered. Jesse nodded. "I do." They stood in silence for a long moment, listening. The noise wasn't loud, not really. It was almost like it was coming from inside their ears, or maybe under the ground, a kind of ghost reverb that rose and fell with the gusts. "Let's go," Maria said suddenly, pulling Jesse's sleeve. "I don't like this." He didn't argue. He backed the SUV up slowly, one last look at the streaks of rubber that stopped in the middle of nothing, then pulled back onto the road, but they weren't alone anymore. For the next 10 miles, the Soholand was the Fohumnen. Wind carried that same low, throaty hum, like the bike was still pacing them, riding parallel just out of view. Sometimes it came from behind, sometimes ahead, sometimes overhead. Jesse kept checking his mirrors, but the lane stayed empty. Maria wouldn't look out her window. She just sat stiff and pale, eyes fixed dead ahead, fingers clenched tight in her lap. When they finally rolled into Del Rio, The noise faded like it had never existed, and the kids woke up complaining about the heat and asking for milkshakes. Jesse and Maria didn't say a word to each other about what they'd heard. Not until the next morning, when Jesse went to gas up the suburban dot at the station, he struck up conversation with a guy in a biker, filling up a Triumph. Weathered old man with a white beard and road-burnt skin. "Strange thing happened south of here yesterday," Jesse said casually. "Saw a Harley blow past us doing maybe 90, then a couple miles up, nothing. No wreck, just skid marks. In the middle of the road." The old man stopped pumping. "Where exactly?" he asked, voice flat. "Maybe 15 miles south? Right around mile marker 213. The biker looked down, jaw clenching. "That'd be Carl's spot." "Carl?" The man looked back up. "Carl Jensen. Rode a black Electra Glide. Been gone. 5 years this August. Gone like dead?" The man didn't smile. "Gone like no one knows. Rode out from here on a solo trip, heading down toward Eagle Pass. Called his wife from a gas station, said he was about an hour out. Never showed up. Cops searched up and down 277, helicopters and all. Never found a thing. Just disappeared." Jesse felt his stomach turn. "There were skid marks," he said quietly. "There always are," the man replied. "Right in the same damn place. Sometimes folks hear him. Sometimes they see him. Bike tearing down the blacktop like it's running from something or toward it, but no one ever catches up. No one ever sees where he goes." "Was the bike loud?" "Loud as hell," the old man nodded. "And that custom intake, you'd hear it 2 counties over?" Jesse swallowed hard. "We heard it, for miles, after he was gone." The man capped his tank and didn't say anything else. Just gave Jesse a look, something between pity and warning, and rolled off slow toward the sun-baked stretch of road. The Triumphs. Engine quiet compared to the phantom roar Jesse still heard in his dreams. That night, Jesse didn't sleep well. Neither did Maria. Sometime after midnight, just as the house had gone still and the AC kicked off, Jesse sat up in bed, heart pounding. In the distance, faint, like a memory, he swore he heard it again. That same low rumble. Like a Harley, cutting through the wind at full throttle, somewhere far away. Or maybe nowhere at all. He didn't tell Maria. She was already lying awake, staring at the ceiling, her face pale in the dark. Neither of them spoke. They just listened, and somewhere, out on the endless blacktop south of Del Rio, something still rode hard and fast, never stopping, never slowing. Trapped in the wind and the heat and the empty silence, searching for a road that led back home but never did. It started just before midnight, somewhere on the long, flat stretch of Highway 83 north of Laredo. Jace Tucker was behind the wheel of a midnight blue Peterbilt that still smelled faintly of leather and diesel, fresh off the company yard and loaded with a trailer full of cold cuts bound for Amarillo. He was a week into his solo runs, finally cleared by dispatch after riding shotgun with Earl Old, grizzled, and retired now who'd spent every mile teaching him how to shift like butter and spot trouble a half mile before it showed its teeth. Earl never talked much about the CB, though. Said it was mostly noise these days. More ghosts than truckers on it after midnight, he grunted once, then laughed like it wasn't a joke. The road was quiet, almost too quiet. The way it gets in those South Texas nights where the air seems thick and soundless, and the moon hangs just low enough to watch you. There was no other traffic for miles. The yellow lines kept flashing beneath the dash like a slow pulse, and the hum of the tires had started to lull Jace into that dangerous in-between state. Not quite asleep, but not fully awake either, so he flipped on the CB. It crackled to life with a burst of static, then silence. "Breaker 19, he said, trying to mimic Earl's gravelly drawl. This is Midnight Runner. Anybody got their ears on? Nothing for a beat. Then a voice-smoothed male with a faint, far-off echo cut through. Jace, he froze. The voice wasn't a call sign. Wasn't even a trucker's voice. It sounded too clear. Like someone whispering through a storm drain. You out past the Devil's Elbow, boy? The voice said. You're running north, hauling cold meat. Jace swallowed, looked around the cab. Checked the rearview mirrors. Nothing but the long dark behind him. Double quotes, how do you know my name? He asked, hand hovering over the radio switch. Same way I know your mama's name is Loretta, and she's been praying for you every night since you left Abilene, the voice said. Another voice chuckled in the background, deeper, raspier. She worries about that mole on your neck, says it wasn't there when you were a boy. A cold prickling ran up his spine. He reached instinctively to the back of his neck. The mole was there, raised and dry. You passed the turn, the voice said again, softer now, almost sad. Now you don't go back. The CB went silent. Just a hiss of static that started to sound more like breathing if you listened too long. Jace slammed the switch off. The highway ahead was the same two thin bands of concrete stretching into nowhere, flanked by scrubland and distant barbed wire fences, but the night had changed. It had weight now, like something was pressing down on the roof of the cab, just lightly. Not enough to crush, but enough to notice. He kept driving. Somewhere past Carrizo Springs, a hitchhiker appeared on the side of the road, just standing there, thumb out, head tilted. Pale jeans, flannel shirt, no bag. Jace slowed instinctively, then stopped. The man didn't move. Something about his stance was wrong. Like he wasn't waiting to be picked up. Like he was waiting for him. He eased forward again without opening the door. The CB crackled back on. Didn't matter that he'd shut it off. You shouldn't have done that, Jace, a woman's voice said now. She sounded older, strained. That was your chance. You don't get another. He yanked the cord from the radio, pulled it clean out. The CB screen flickered off. Still, he heard her voice. Not through the speakers, through the vents. The seams in the dashboard. The floor. He drove faster. The GPS blinked out sometime past Katerina. He didn't notice it right away, too focused on the road. But when he looked down to see how far, he was from Crystal City. The screen was just a soft, glowing blue, pulsing like a slow heartbeat. Then the headlights dimmed. Not all at once. Like something was sucking power, pulling light straight out of the battery. The Peterbilt began to slow despite his foot pressing harder on the pedal. The engine didn't stall, it just quieted, like it didn't want to be heard. And in that near silence, the voices returned. All around him now. You passed it. You missed the sign. No turning back now. Why didn't you listen, Jace? Why didn't you look? And through it all, the sound of soft breathing. Not his own. Closer. In the passenger seat. He turned. There was no one there. Just an old CB handset dangling from the dash. He didn't remember plugging it back in. Exit's gone now, a voice said, right beside his ear. You're on the long road. He slammed the brakes. The truck skidded, tires shrieking against asphalt, but didn't stop. Not all the way. It coasted to a slow crawl, like the road itself was pulling the wheels. There was no sign of the last town. No lights ahead. No rear lights behind. Just endless dark scrubland and a sky that had lost its stars. Jace opened the door and jumped. His boots hit dirt, not pavement. Dry, loose, rust-colored dirt, like clay cracked under the sun. But it wasn't hot. It was freezing. He turned in a slow circle. The Peterbilt was gone. No tire marks. No sound, just the empty horizon. And then, rising from the dust like heat waves in reverse, shapes. Dozens of them. Men, women. Some in trucker caps. some barefoot, one holding a bent CB antenna in both hands like a broken cross. Their faces were soft, blurry, like old Polaroids left out in the rain. "You heard the call," one of them said. A child's voice. "You answered." The others nodded. "You passed the turn." Jace backed up. His foot caught on something metal in the dirt. He looked down. A cracked, sun-faded license plate. Texas, Midnight R&R, the same one he'd seen Earl screw onto the Peterbilt a week ago. He ran. He didn't know where. Just away. But every direction looked the same. Flat land, dead mesquite trees, fences that never ended and led nowhere. And overhead, that empty sky that seemed to lean down closer the farther he moved. He ran until his lungs felt like they'd split, then collapsed in the dirt. He could hear them walking now, not running. Just walking. Coming to welcome him. Coming. To tell him what happens to those who stay on the long road. And behind it all, the static hum of a CB radio calling out names long forgotten, on a frequency that never needed power to be heard. At first, Ray didn't think much of the bus. He was just outside Brackettville, heading west along Highway 90 in the miserable blue-gray hour before dawn, where the light is weak and the mind is weaker. The hour when tired eyes trick you and shadows move on their own. He'd been driving for close to 6 hours, hauling HVAC units from San Antonio to Marfa, and he wasn't even supposed to be out this way. Construction had shut down the route he usually took through Del Rio, so he'd rerouted south, hugging the edge of nowhere. His eyes were starting to sting. His shoulders ached. And every now and then, he had to slap himself to keep awake. Then he saw it. The school bus was parked just past a narrow bridge that ran over a dry arroyo. It sat on the shoulder like a bloated carcass, half in the gravel, nose angled slightly toward the ditch, as if it had tried to pull over too quickly. It was a dull, sun-bleached yellow, rust flaking around the rear wheel wells and under the seams of the door. Its hazard lights weren't on, and there were no cones behind it, no signs of distress. Just that dead hunk of steel waiting in the dark. Ray slowed as he passed, out of caution more than curiosity. The thing didn't look drivable. Its back bumper was dented, and one of the side mirrors was hanging on by a thread of wire. What really got him, though, were the windows. Every single one was fogged up from the inside, like breath, like body, heat. Even the windshield was a pale blur, dew trailing in streaks down the glass. Yet there were no lights inside, no movement. Just fog and filth and an eerie stillness. Then, as his headlights swept past, he saw them figures not clearly, not faces, just silhouettes, small ones. Seated shapes along both sides of the aisle, slumped or stiff, some with heads bowed, others turned toward the window as if watching him, as if they'd been waiting. He felt a chill slip down the length of his back, subtle but sharp. The way a spider tickles the base of your neck. Ray drove another 100 yards before pulling over. He rubbed his eyes, cursed himself, then checked his mirrors. The bus sat there in the dark, unmoving, almost indistinguishable from the brush and twisted mesquite behind it. His hand hovered over the CB, then dropped. Who was he going to call? Cops? It's not illegal for a bus to park on the shoulder. And he wasn't even sure what he'd seen. Sleep deprivation does strange things. He shook it off and kept driving. The next day, he stopped at a diner near Sanderson. He told himself he wasn't going to bring it up. Told himself it didn't matter. But as he sat at the counter with a coffee and a plate of runny eggs, he found himself asking the waitress, a wrinkled woman with a long braid and hands like cracked leather, if there were any schools around that ran buses through the old 90 stretch near Brackettville. She blinked, set down the coffee pot. Not for 20 years, she said. That route shut down after they built the new bypass. Ain't been any kids out that way in ages. Ray let it go. Sort of. A week later, he found himself rooted that way again. Late night delivery. Same highway. Same desolate stretch. He didn't expect to see the bus again. Would have bet against it. But there it was parked in the exact same spot. It looked even worse than before. Now, the tires were half sunken in the dirt as if it hadn't moved in weeks. The rust had bloomed across its flanks like infection. More concerning were the windows. They weren't just fogged this time. They were wet. Beaded from the inside. Condensation so heavy it trailed in streaks down the glass like fingers dragging. He didn't want to slow, but he did anyway. His headlights lit the inside again just enough to see the silhouettes. Still slumped in the same seats. Still unmoving. But this time, some of the heads were turned. A few were facing him. He could feel it. He kept driving. Fast. Didn't sleep well that night. Had dreams of bus doors screeching open and a dry voice whispering his name. A chorus of faint little voices behind it, chanting something he couldn't understand. His sheets were soaked with sweat when he woke, and he smelled rust in the air. He tried to tell himself it was just exhaustion, that he'd imagined the whole thing, that maybe there really was an abandoned bus out there left behind after the school routes changed. That maybe homeless folks used it to sleep in, or kids dared each other to sneak in at night. But then came the third time. It was a Thursday. He'd taken a load down from Kerrville to Presidio, and the fastest route meant cutting through Brackettville. Again. This time he kept his eyes peeled for the bus, part of him hoping it'd be gone, part of him terrified it wouldn't be. It wasn't. But this time, it wasn't on the shoulder. It was in the middle of the road, dead center, blocking both lanes. He braked hard, tires skidding slightly on the asphalt, and came to a stop a good 50 feet away. The hazard lights were on now, blinking yellow in the darkness like some kind of sick pulse. He honked. Nothing. Waited. Nothing. Then, the headlights flicked on. Not his. The bus's, and behind the wheel sat someone, or something. He couldn't make out the face. Could barely even see ahead, but something was there. Pale hands gripped the wheel, not moving, not blinking. Then the bus began to inch forward. No engine sound. No rumble, just movement. Smooth, unnatural, like it was being pushed by something unseen. It didn't swerve or try to avoid him. Just kept coming. Ray threw the truck in reverse, backing up onto the shoulder, his heartbeat pounding in his ears. Bus passed by him, slow and steady. The figures inside didn't move this time, but every window was fogged with breath. One small hand pressed flat against the glass beside him as it went by. And when the rear of the bus cleared his cab, he saw the lettering. Not school district or K-12 transport, like normal buses. Just one word, flaking in rust-colored paint across the back. Remember. He didn't drive that way again. He couldn't. He tried to tell a friend about it once. Another trucker named Dwayne, who'd been doing cross-Texas runs since the 80s. Dwayne just nodded slow and said, "Yeah, that route's got history." Ray pressed him. "What history?" Dwayne hesitated. Bus full of kids went missing back in '93. Never found a trace. No wreckage, no bodies. Just ... gun. Happened near a dry arroyo west of Brackettville. They say the driver took a wrong turn and never made it to the next town. Ray didn't respond. He just stared into his coffee for a long time. That night, as he lay in his rig at a truck stop in Alpine, he swore he heard something. A hiss of air brakes, the clink of metal steps, and the faintest sound of children ... whispering. He kept his eyes shut, and he never drove Highway 90 again. It started just outside of Sonora, Texas, that long, quiet stretch of Highway 277 where the hills roll like sleeping giants and the scrub trees twist into gnarled silhouettes under the moon. Erica had been driving since sundown, pushing her little silver Corolla north toward Abilene. She always hated night drives, but her sister's baby shower was the next morning, and she didn't want to miss it. She figured if she gotten late and slept a few hours, it would still be worth it. The gas station coffee sloshing in the passenger cup holder was her third one, and she'd already chewed down 2 sticks of spearmint gum to keep her alert. There weren't many other cars out. There. A semi passed her once, and a pickup with deer lights blasted by earlier, but for the most part, she was alone. Just her, the dark road, and whatever lined it. She liked it that way, mostly. Quiet time. Time to think. It was around midnight. When it started, she glanced in the rearview mirror like she'd done 100 times that night, just a habit, nothing more. But this time, there was something there. A shape, a figure, a man, sitting perfectly still in the middle of her back seat. Not slumped, not relaxed, just sitting, upright, pale as smoke. He was wearing what looked like an old suit, dark. Lapels, collar slightly askew. His face wasn't grotesque or monstrous. It was just wrong. The skin looked too smooth, like wax over bone, and his eyes were open too wide. They didn't blink. She gasped and jerked her head around to look, her breath catching in her throat. Nothing. No one in the seat. Nothing on the floorboards. She whipped her head back forward, heart pounding, swerving a little on the shoulder rumble strip before correcting. The mirror still showed him, sitting there. Mouth moving, like he was whispering. Her name. She snapped the mirror upward, angling it away, so she couldn't see anything but the ceiling now. Her fingers trembled on the wheel. "You're tired," she said aloud, trying to shake it off. "That coffee's doing the opposite now. You're imagining crap." But deep down she knew better. You don't hallucinate that clearly. Not the kind of detail she'd seen in that face. The deep furrow between the man's brows. The way his lips moved like he was trying to say something. Not shout, not talk. Whisper. Whisper something meant just for her. She kept driving. Didn't dare look back again. The night got darker somehow. The hills seemed to press in. The road felt narrower. An hour passed. Or maybe it was 10 minutes. Time warped on that highway. Every curve looked the same. Every sign said the same thing. There was a rest stop up ahead, one of those old stone ones built in the 60s, with squat picnic tables and no lights. She pulled over, tires crunching on gravel, and just sat there with the engine running. The soft purr of the car felt like the only normal thing left in the world. She forced herself to look in the mirror again. It was angled away, but now it had moved, just slightly. Enough to show the man again. Closer now. His face leaned forward, as if his body was straining, toward the front seat, like he was getting up, 1 inch at a time, slowly closing that space between them. His lips still moved. She still couldn't hear what he was saying. She shut her eyes and started breathing fast. "You're not real," she whispered. "I didn't see you. You're not there." She turned around again, flung herself over the seat to prove it. Nothing. Back. Seat was empty. When she turned back to the mirror, he was right behind her, inches away. His mouth wasn't whispering anymore. It was wide open, like he was screaming, but no sound came out. His eyes were bloodshot now, veins pulsing like rivers of ink, and something dripped from his mouth. Something black and thick, she screamed. The mirror cracked, single line across it like a lightning bolt. And the man vanished. She drove fast. Didn't stop again. Didn't look back. Didn't sleep that night in Abilene. The next morning, her sister hugged her in the doorway, commenting on how pale she looked. Erica made up something about a flat tire. She didn't want to talk about it, didn't want to remember, but the next day, when she got in her car to go home, The mirror was still. Cracked. And behind her? Nothing. Until she put the car in gear. And caught a glimpse of him again. Not in the seat. This time, crouched behind it, mouth moving again. Erica never took the highway after that. She bought a new mirror, even got the car detailed. Burned sage. Prayed. Nothing worked. Every time she drove alone, no matter how short the trip, he showed up. Not always right away. Sometimes he waited until she stopped at a red light or pulled into a gas station. Sometimes his mouth would just move slowly, repeating her name over and over like a chant. Other times, he smiled. Once during a storm near Brownwood, she caught his reflection in the rear view, not in the car this time, but outside, staring in through the back glass like a child locked out in the rain. His eyes met hers, and she couldn't move. Not until the thunder cracked so loud, she snapped back and floored the gas. She tried everything. Therapists, priests, even stayed off the road for a whole month, thinking it was the driving that triggered him. But then one night, she saw him in the bathroom mirror, just behind her shoulder. And this time, she could hear him. Almost there, Erica. That's all he said. Almost there. She moved to Dallas last month. Got rid of the Corolla. Doesn't drive anymore. Uber everywhere. Walks when she can. But people still talk. Folks she meets for the first time. They'll glance over her shoulder, mid-conversation, then go quiet. Ask if someone just walked in behind her. She tells them no, but she knows the truth. The rear view isn't in the car anymore. It's everywhere. And it always shows what's not there until it is. It was the kind of road you take when you don't want to be seen. Farm to market, west of El Dorado, Texas, winding through scrub brush and sunburned cattle country, where buzzards circle slow and fences sag like they've given up. Out there, the land is low and dry, the sky too wide, and the nights fall fast without warning. Wade Larrabee had been taking that road twice a week since spring calving season, hauling feed out to an old client's lease near Juneau. He knew every bend and cedar patch, every culvert and cattle guard. Knew, too, that the bar ditch along County Road 1023 had always been clean, empty, not even a beer can most days. That Tuesday evening, dusk was thick and red as a dying fire, bleeding across the sky. Wade had driven it slow, mostly out of habit. No rush. The client didn't need him till Wednesday, and he liked the stillness. Windows down, radio off. Just the sound of gravel crunching under the tires and the occasional wind slap against the mirrors. A jackrabbit darted out near mile marker 14, but that was the only life he saw. The ditches were dry, the fences bare. No markers, no flags, no signs. He'd have noticed if there was anything. Wade was the kind of man who always noticed. He spent the night at a bunkhouse near the ranch, drinking one beer with dinner and turning in before the heat of the sheets could chase sleep off. He didn't dream. He never did. But the next morning, when he headed back the same way, rolling out around 5:30 a.m. with the air still blue and dew crisp, he slammed the brakes not 10 minutes down the road. They were there, 6 of them. White crosses, wooden, freshly painted, standing straight and clean in the ditch on the east side of the road, just before a dip that ran down to a dry creek bed. 6 crosses, evenly spaced like soldiers in formation, each with a small bundle of wildflowers tied at the base. Indian blanket, primrose, a bit of yellow broom weed. Wade stared. His mouth dried out. He pulled over and left the truck running. Got out slow. The silence was total. No birds, no wind. Just the idle rumble of his engine and the soft crunch of gravel under his boots as he approached the first cross. There were no names. Not on the first, not on the second, not even initials. Just plain white wood and the smell of sawdust. But the 6th one, the last in the line, a little crooked in the dirt, had a name. He bent down to look at it, thinking maybe the light played tricks. Maybe it was graffiti. Maybe kids, but it wasn't. Wade Larrabee, his own name. Carved careful and deep into the upright plank with a blade or chisel. No mistaking it. He backed away. Got in the truck. Drove. Fast. Didn't stop until he hit the outskirts of Sonora and parked at a diner he knew. He ordered coffee, he didn't. Drink and sat in a booth staring at the wall. The waitress Delors asked if he was okay. He nodded but didn't mean it. By lunch, he'd convinced himself it was a prank. Somebody messing with him. He wasn't young. 64 last November. But he wasn't senile either. He knew what he'd seen. And he knew that ditch had been bare less than 12 hours before. Someone had put up 6 perfectly spaced crosses, tied flowers, and carved his name, all in the dark. For what? A joke? A scare? Still, he drove back. Out. Couldn't not. Needed to see it again. Just to check. Just to be sure. But when he got there, the ditch was empty. Flat, dry, not a single cross. No sign anyone had ever been there. The ground wasn't even disturbed. Wade got out. Walked the line. Counted off 6 paces where each cross had stood. Kicked at the dirt. No holes, no tracks, no flowers. He felt dizzy, like he'd stepped sideways from the world and something hadn't followed him back. He didn't sleep that night. Sat on the porch with his rifle and the dog until morning. Nothing came. Nothing moved. Just the moon and the wind and the heavy silence of waiting. Next day, he didn't go out to the ranch. Called in. Said he was sick. He wasn't. Not in the regular way, but his hands trembled and his chest felt tight. He found himself looking at every roadside he passed, scanning ditches like they might bloom again when he blinked. By Thursday, it started happening every morning. More crosses. Not always 6, sometimes 4, sometimes 8. Always white. Always. New. Never there the evening before. Never any names, except sometimes. His brother's name showed up 2 days later. Tom Larrabee. Dead 5 years. Pancreatic cancer. Wade stared at it for 20 full minutes before he could breathe right again. He stopped sleeping. His house filled with coffee cups and lit cigarettes burned down to the filters. The TV stayed off. The radio stayed off. Everything stayed off. He drove the road obsessively, marked the mileposts, photographed the ditches, talked to the sheriff, who gave him a look like he might want to consider early retirement or a little time away. The sheriff said there'd been no accidents, no deaths, no vandalism complaints. He even drove the road with Wade. Nothing. Just road and dust and fence. Until Sunday morning. Wade got up before dawn. Drove the stretch near marker 14 again. This time there were 13 crosses, all fresh, all shining in the sunrise. And every single one had a name. He walked the line again, his knees weak, reading them one by one. Tom Larrabee, Emma Jean Larrabee, his mother. Vince Ward, his best friend from high school, dead in 72. Carlene Dorsey, his ex-wife. The rest were strangers. Until the last 2. Amy Louise Geller, his neighbor's daughter, age 10. Alive as far as he knew. Saw her jumping rope 2 days ago. And again, at the very end. Wade Larrabee. He stared at it. Reached to pull it out of the ground, but it didn't move. The wood was cold and damp in his hands. The flowers smelled stronger. Not like wildflowers anymore, but like lily. Funeral lily. He went home and drank until the bottle was empty. Woke up on the floor past midnight. A nosebleed crusted down his chin. The air thick and wrong. He didn't remember dreaming, but he woke with one thought. They're not there to mark the dead. They're there to mark who's next. The next morning he didn't go out. closed every curtain, shut off the porch light, sat in his chair with the dog and waited for daylight. But he couldn't shake the need, the itch behind his eyes. He had to know Dot, so he drove out one last time. The crosses were back .20 this time, lined up tight, stretching along the ditch like fence posts. No names. Not one. He walked the row, hands trembling. But at the end, where his cross should have been, there was nothing. Just a small patch of scorched grass. And next to it, the dog. Dead. Stiff, eyes open, tongue out. Wade dropped to his knees. It wasn't a warning anymore. It was a countdown. And the next morning, when the sun rose over mile marker 14, the ditch held 21 white crosses, fresh flowers on every one. And this time, not carved, but burned into the wood with black twisted letters, was a name he'd seen before. Wade Luraby. And that was the last time anyone saw him. It started just past dusk, that hazy kind of Texas dust that doesn't fall so much as stretch out like molasses, long and sticky across the windshield. I'd been driving for 3 hours already, headed west on a back route that cut through the flatter parts of McCulloch County, trying to shave off time between San Saba and Brady. GPS had taken me off the highway around mile marker 137, maybe 138. I wasn't sure anymore. The air had that charged feeling, humid but restless, the kind of heat that makes sweat bead on the back of your neck even with the AC running full blast. It was just me, the road, and whatever was dead on the radio. Static mostly. FM faded out completely about 20 miles ago, and AM had started whispering strange half-languages I couldn't place. I left it off and let the tires hum. That section of road, a 2-lane stretch barely lit by my high beams, had long ranch fences. On either side, barbed and rusted, cutting through wide swaths of brittle grassland. No towns for miles, no gas stations, no houses, no billboards. Just that kind of nowhere Texas only locals know. I'd passed mile marker 144, maybe a minute before it happened. At first I thought it was a coyote. A blur on the shoulder, low too. The ground, gray and fast. I lifted my foot off the gas but didn't brake. No reason to slam the brakes for wildlife out here. But it didn't dart off into the field like you'd expect. It stayed with me, running, right alongside my driver's side door, not 10 feet off the pavement. I looked, really looked, and realized it wasn't a coyote. It was a dog. Gray. Big, like a mix between a German shepherd and something leaner, maybe a wolfhound. Its coat looked like old ash. Matte, dusty, and streaked with something dark. It wasn't panting. It wasn't even straining. Its legs moved in a way that didn't seem entirely right, smooth like film run at half speed, but still keeping perfect pace with my car, which was doing 65. That's when I noticed the eyes. Bright, not glowing like you'd expect from reflection, but glowing from inside, like two coals in a dying fire. They locked onto me, straight through the glass, and I felt a jolt in my gut like the first drop on a roller coaster. I stared too long and the car started to veer. I corrected quickly and looked ahead, but when I glanced back, it was still there. Running. I hit 70. It kept pace. Its paws, I saw them clearly now under the headlight side flare, were bleeding. Each step left a faint red smudge on the pavement, but it didn't limp. It didn't slow. It ran like it had no concept of pain or fatigue. I don't know why I braked. Curiosity, maybe. Or that stupid human instinct to confirm that something unnatural is real. I eased down slow. And at 50, the dog began to drift closer to the shoulder. At 30, it peeled off onto the grass and stood there, just beyond the reach of the headlights. Staring. Its chest heaved like it had been running for hours. But the eyes didn't move. They just watched. I came to a full stop, and it took a step forward. Something about the movement felt wrong, almost human, like it was mimicking how a person would step towards something uncertain. The air around my car seemed heavier all of a sudden. The chirping bugs had gone silent. Even the wind through the grass seemed to hold its breath. I sat there, unsure of what to do, hands white-knuckled on the wheel. My phone, which had been in the console charging, buzzed once, a soft vibration that nearly made me jump. I glanced down. No service, but the screen lit up with a photo notification. A preview from my camera roll. I hadn't taken a picture. I opened it. It was a shot from the driver's seat, my dashboard, my speedometer, the reflection in the window. But there was something else. In the back seat. A shape, not distinct, just a vague, gray outline like a body hunkered low, crouched behind the driver's seat with two faint glowing spots where the eyes would be. I looked up so fast I got dizzy. Twisted around, heart hammering. Nothing there. But when I turned back to the Gimbasol windshield, the dog was gone. No trace, no blood on the road. No figure in the grass, just the empty dark ahead, trees swaying gently like they hadn't just borne witness to something they'd rather forget. I hit the gas harder than I should have and didn't let up until I reached Brady, parked under a gas station's fluorescent lights, and didn't move for a solid 10 minutes. When I finally worked up the nerve to check my photos again, the picture was gone. No notification, no image in the roll. Just the last photo I remembered taking, a blurry shot of my breakfast. Taco that morning. I didn't tell anyone for a while. Who would believe it? Hey, there's this ghost dog that runs alongside cars at 65 and shows up in your backseat via phantom iPhone notifications. Yeah, that would go over well. But then, a couple weeks later, I was scrolling some local forum, one of those old message boards barely holding on, the kind with black backgrounds and orange font, and someone posted about a stretch of road outside Brady, right near mile marker 144. Said they saw a dog. Gray. Running like hellfire was chasing it, but never breaking pace. Bleeding feet, eyes like hot coals. There were replies. Others had seen it too. Truckers mostly, a few locals. One guy swore he hit it with his F250 and it left no dent, just a smear of blood and a smear on his memory. Another woman said it ran beside her for miles until she slammed the brakes and it stared so long into her eyes that she couldn't sleep right since. And someone else, someone anonymous, posted a theory that the dog wasn't a dog at all. It was something older, something that watched the road, looking for drivers who strayed too far from themselves. People who were tired, distracted, empty. People carrying something in the back seat that didn't belong to them. Regret, guilt, a memory too sharp to be just memory. They said if you break, it marks you. And if you stare back for too long, it follows. That was 6 months ago, sometimes. I hear claws on the sidewalk outside my apartment. Even though I live on the 3rd floor. Sometimes my phone lights up with no reason. The screen showing the reflection of something gray just behind me. And sometimes, when I close my eyes at night, I dream I'm driving again, endless road ahead, and something running beside me that never tires. The first time I heard about the man in the yellow hat, I was sitting in the back booth of a diner off Highway 105, somewhere between Conroe and Cleveland, Texas. It was past midnight, that kind of deep night hush when even the jukebox keeps quiet. The trucker who brought it up didn't mean to startle anyone. He just said it like you'd mention a pothole or an annoying CB signal. "You ever get a rider who sees that tall fella in the yellow hat?" he asked, stirring his cold coffee. "Always on the passenger side, always smiling. You never see him yourself. Just the one riding shotgun." At the time, I thought he was spinning tailies, Truckers do that. Gets lonely out there on the road, and the black ribbon of highway starts to stretch in your mind like taffy. But I remembered it. It stuck with me like a splinter under the nail. I wasn't a driver myself. Back then, just a journalist tagging along for a week with a long hauler named Ray Dominguez, writing a fluff piece for some magazine nobody remembers now. We were hauling fiberglass bathtubs from Houston up to Amarillo. I rode passenger the whole time. Feet on the dash, recorder in my lap, not thinking much of that truck stop story. But I'd think about it later. It happened somewhere around dusk on the third day. The sky had gone that sickly gray-yellow it gets before a storm, and Ray was chain-smoking like a fiend, fingers drumming on the wheel. We just passed through a town called Seymour, a blink-and-you-miss-it place that smelled like rust and wet grain. I had my eyes on the side mirror, watching the road behind us because that stretch of highway felt unusually still. No cars, no signs of life, just the road and the wind. And that's when I saw him. He was walking along the shoulder, same direction we were heading, not hurried, not even bothered by the wind. Just walking tall and lean, with long limbs that didn't quite swing right. He wore a mustard yellow coat and a matching fedora, the brim casting a perfect crescent shadow across his face. But I saw his smile. Wide, pale, stretched too far across the bottom half of his face like it had been painted on. His eyes were fixed ahead, but that smile, it felt like it was for me. I turned in my seat. Quick, heart thumping, expecting to see him right there outside the window. Nothing. Just blur and bar ditch. I looked back to the mirror. He was gone. You see something? Ray asked, not taking his eyes off the road. I told him what I saw. He didn't laugh, didn't joke. Just nodded real slow and said, passenger always sees him first. He wouldn't say more. Wouldn't talk the rest of that leg of the drive. That night we pulled into a roadside motel somewhere east of Lubbock. Ray downed 3 Coors and locked the truck like it owed him something. I lay in my room, staring at the popcorn ceiling, thinking about that grin. Next morning, Ray was gone. Left without me. Didn't answer his phone, didn't answer CB. His dispatcher said he'd checked in around 5 a.m., but he never made the next stop. They found the truck 2 days later, parked off a narrow service road near Childress. Still locked, still in gear. Doors closed. No Ray. I didn't write again after that. I told the magazine I was done. Wrote a piece about the loneliness of truck life and handed him my badge. But I kept thinking about that mirror, that man, that smile. Years passed. I moved on. Got married, had a daughter, worked odd jobs. But that image never let go. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses of yellow out of the corner of my eye when I drove at night. Once, just outside of San Angelo, my wife swore she saw someone on the shoulder. I was driving. I looked. There was no one. Tall guy. Yellow hat. She said, frowning, smiling. He was smiling so big. I didn't tell her what it meant, but I started collecting the stories. There were more than I expected. Online forums, local paper clippings, even a few recordings from terrified passengers. The same pattern. Highway shoulder, always the passenger side mirror, always at night or close to it, always a smile. And always gone when you look straight at him. One guy, a retired trucker named Ellis, said he saw the man for 7 nights in a row while hauling livestock between Abilene and San Antonio. Each night, the figure was closer. First night, he was barely a smudge in the mirror. By the 7th, he was just outside the passenger window, looking in, grinning. Ellis swerved into a ditch and quit driving for good. Claimed he saw the yellow hat in his dreams for weeks after. Another woman, college student out of Denton, said she was on a late-night rideshare heading down Highway 6 when she noticed the man walking beside them. Her driver didn't see him. She got so scared she made him stop the car. When he finally relented, they pulled over and the man wasn't outside. But he was reflected in the side mirror, standing still, right where the passenger door would have. She got out. The driver didn't. He was found the next morning, sitting behind the wheel, eyes wide open, mouth stretched in a silent scream. Like something had been taken from him without a mark. It became an obsession for me. I started driving long routes again, renting cars, putting ads out for people willing to ride shotgun. Most nights were uneventful, but once in a while, just once in a long while, a rider would stiffen in the seat and go pale. Ask me if I saw him. I never did, but they always described the same thing. Tall, yellow coat, yellow hat, pale smile. One man, some ex-oilfield roughneck, started screaming when he saw the mirror, pointing at it like it burned him. He tried to open the door while we were going 70. I had to grab the wheel with one hand and hold him back with the other. We skidded to the shoulder and he bolted out, yelling, "He's got no damn feet. He's floating." He vanished into the scrub. I didn't go after him. After that, I stopped looking for answers. Some things, I think, just exist. They don't ask for belief. They don't care what you know. They just are. It's been quiet for a few years now. I don't ride highways after dark anymore. But my daughter's learning to drive, and the other night she came home pale as milk. I asked what was wrong. She said, "You're gonna laugh, but there was a guy on the side of the road. He had on this weird old yellow suit and a hat, like vintage or something. He smiled at me in the mirror, only in the mirror. And when I looked out the window, he was gone." I didn't laugh. I didn't say a word, but I checked her side mirror the next morning. And even in the full light of day, for the briefest second, I thought I saw a tall shape flicker there, a hint of yellow, a whisper of a grin. So if you ever find yourself riding passenger through some forgotten stretch of Texas road, and you see something in the mirror, something tall and thin with a mustard-colored hat, don't try to look at it straight on. Don't open the door. Don't say its name, if it even has one. Just look straight ahead. Ride on, and pray the driver never starts smiling back. It was one of those nights where the air felt thick with static, like something was waiting just beyond the headlights. The kind of feeling you get deep in your gut, like a warning no one says out loud. Cassie Jensen had been on the road since noon, driving west on Highway 84 after 3 straight days of clearing out her late aunt's trailer in Crockett. Grief weighed heavier than the suitcases in her trunk. It was a slow, lonely drive, the kind where the only sound is your own breath and the rubbery hum of tires on blacktop. By 8:43 p.m., the sun had long gone. The trees were just crooked outlines, and her stomach let out a sound loud enough to fill the empty space. She pulled off in a little town called Rock Springs. It wasn't marked on any of the new maps, but she'd seen a blue reflective sign with a coffee cup on it near mile. Marker 221. Just a shell of a town with one gas station and a small, red and white diner with the faded name Daisy's hand-painted above the door. The kind of place that had probably looked old even when it was new. The parking lot was cracked gravel. Weeds shot up through the spaces between. She parked under a flickering lamp and went inside. The diner was nearly empty, just her, the short order, cook behind the window, and a middle-aged cashier with an old ballpoint pen tucked behind her ear. The woman greeted her with a tired smile and handed her a laminated menu. Cassie ordered eggs, toast, and a slice of pecan pie. Nothing fancy. The place smelled like scorched coffee and fried onions. She picked the booth by the window so she could keep an eye on her car, an old white Camry with a dented front bumper and mismatched door handles. She sat there for maybe 20 minutes, checked her phone twice, scrolled through photos she wasn't ready to delete. Her food came. She ate quietly, left cash on the table, and walked to the counter to pay. The cashier squinted at her, and something flickered in her eyes, confusion first, then something closer to fear. "You back already?" the woman asked. Cassie blinked. "Sorry? You just paid and left, what, 20 minutes ago? Right after you ordered the pecan pie?" "No, I just sat down 20 minutes ago." The cashier tapped a finger against the register, eyes narrowing. "I watched you pull out. Same car, same clothes, same everything." Cassie gave a confused laugh, the kind people make when things don't quite compute. "You must be mixing me up with someone else." But the cashier was already walking around the counter, wiping her hands on her apron. "No, honey, I watched you walk out. I even made a joke about your bumper falling off. You laughed." "That didn't happen," Cassie said, her voice thinner. "Now, I just got here." The woman didn't respond. She walked past Cassie to the window, looked out at the Camry. It was still parked there, right where Cassie had left it, under the flickering lamp. The windows were fogged slightly from the cool air inside. No one was near it. No one had been. "Cold?" the woman asked. "What?" "The car," she said, eyes still on it. "Did you check? Is the hood cold?" Cassie hesitated, then stepped past her and pushed through the door. The night air hit her like a wave. It had that pine sap and diesel smell you only get in these little Texas towns. She walked to the Camry and touched the hood. Cold as metal should be when it hasn't moved for a while. She got in, put the key in the ignition, and it started without protest. The dashboard clock read 9:12. She turned the heater knob to warm her fingers and just sat there, staring at her reflection in the rearview mirror. Same face, same tired eyes. The cashier came back outside with a cigarette between her lips and a lighter in hand. She didn't light it. She just stood there. "Highway cam's 2 blocks down," she said. "Mounted on a pole right above the old VFW hall. Town's only got one. If you passed through here earlier, it'd show." Cassie didn't want to go. She should have driven off right then, but something about the way the woman stared at her not accusatory, just deeply unsettled made her nod. They walked in silence to the corner. The VFW building was boarded up, but the camera still blinked red from its perch on the power pole. The woman tapped a few keys on the dusty desktop monitor in the back room of the diner, which doubled as a kind of makeshift town office. She pulled up the footage from 30 minutes ago, and there it was, Cassie's Camry. Same busted headlight, same crooked license plate, same dent in the front bumper. Rolling down Main Street and pulling out onto the highway. The timestamp read 8:47 p.m. Cassie was still sitting in the diner at 8:47 p.m., waiting for her toast and pie. She stumbled back from the desk and shook her head. This is some kind of glitch. I've never been here before tonight. Never even heard of Rock Springs until I saw the sign. The woman was silent for a long time, watching her. Then, quietly, "You're not the first." "What?" 3 months ago. Young man, maybe 22. Came in, had pancakes, paid in cash, walked out. An hour later, same kid walks back in, asks if we're open. Same clothes. Same everything. We showed him the tape too. He didn't believe it either. Next day, someone found his car off the road near Barksdale, wrecked, but no body. No blood, just his phone still recording on the passenger seat. Cassie's mouth went dry. The cashier finally lit her cigarette. The flame flared up in the dark, casting shadows on her lined face. "It's this road," she said, exhaling. "Always been strange. My daddy used to call it the mile that runs both ways. Said some nights, the road takes you." Before. "You ever put the car in drive?" Cassie tried to laugh, but it came out wrong. She thanked the woman, got back in her car, and pulled onto the highway. Her hands gripped the wheel too tight. The silence in the Camry felt thicker now. Every mile she passed, she kept glancing at the rear view, like she'd see herself following Dot. By 10:03 p.m., her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered out of instinct. A voice crackled on the other end, faint, like it was coming through a tunnel, filled with water, but it was hers, her own voice. Don't let it leave twice. Then static. The call ended. She dropped the phone and looked around the empty highway. Her headlights cut a narrow path through the dark, but the road stretched on forever. She didn't know it yet, but 10 miles back at the same time, another Cassie stepped out of Daisy's diner, thanked the cashier for the pie, and got into a white Camry with a warm hood. The highway had already taken her, and now she was driving it again. The drive out of San Angelo had been quiet, almost too quiet for a Friday evening, especially on a long stretch of Highway 163 that usually hummed with cattle trucks and oil rigs this time of year. Jess kept both hands on the wheel, her fingers gripping a little tighter than normal. The sun had dipped behind the mesquite trees hours ago, and the world outside the car had melted into that dark, moonless kind of night where you feel like you're floating in a void, not really moving, just suspended in headlights. Cody sat in the passenger seat, fiddling with the radio dial that only spat out static and the occasional preacher hollering about the devil's grip on America. Jess shot him a look when he passed the third station without comment. You're gonna fry the speakers, she said, her voice low. He stopped. Sorry. Just, this stretch feels weird tonight. Like, I don't know, empty. It's always empty out here. Not like this. Feels like the air is waiting for something. Jess didn't respond to that. The night was still, too still. No wind, no crickets. No owl sounds or coyotes wailing in the brush. Just the tires humming against asphalt, the soft tick of the turn. Signal she forgot to switch off 10 miles back, and the quiet thrum of tension in the pit of her gut. They'd passed Barnett Road about 10 minutes ago, which meant they had at least 20 to go before hitting Big Lake. Jess had done this drive dozens of times for work midweek trips out to oilfield suppliers, company meetups, a couple of bar nights when her brother used to live out there. She knew the roads. She knew how the land curved like a lazy snake along the Pecos Basin and how the night animals own these roads after sundown, which is why she noticed it. There wasn't a sound, no engine, no tires on gravel or rubber on road, but something. Dark filled her rearview mirror like smoke rising slow behind them. She squinted, leaned a little. The outline was hard to pin down low, flat, almost matte against the night, but she could see it. A pickup. Old style, maybe 70s or 80s body. All black, no shine, no grill glint, no chrome. Just a void on wheels. Cody noticed her shifting and turned to look. He squinted out the back. Was that behind us before? No, Jess said. I'd have seen it. He reached for the side mirror, then frowned. No lights. You sure it's a truck? It's something? The shape held back at a distance, never gaining, never falling behind. It followed like it had nowhere else to go. Jess tapped the brakes once, just to see. It mimicked her, slowed. Perfectly, like a shadow stretching in perfect time. Cody reached into the glove box and pulled out his flashlight. I'm waving this out the back. Let them know we see him. He rolled down the window and flashed the beam. The cone of white light cut across the dark highway and landed on the thing. But instead of reflecting or illuminating anything, the beam just ended, like it hit a wall of black. No reflection, no shine, no bounce back off paint or glass. Just blackness swallowing the light. What the hell, he muttered, yanking his arm back inside and rolling up the window fast. Jess pressed the gas pedal harder. I don't like it, she said. No kidding. It stayed behind them, always behind. Jess watched as the odometer ticked up mile by mile, but the distance in her mirror never changed. When she switched lanes just to test, it drifted after her like a magnet. No deviation. Like it wasn't following the car, but her. Like it was latched onto her somehow. They passed a broken-down rest stop with one of those half-rusted picnic tables, and a trash can split open like something had clawed it apart. Jess flipped on the high beams as a reflex and swore softly. In the rear view, she saw the truck again, only it was closer now. Still no sound, still no lights. Just black steel or black shadow inching closer inch by inch with no visible movement. Like it was gliding instead of rolling. "I'm pulling off," she said. "Screw this. Jess, I need to see it." The car rolled onto the shoulder near a narrow service road. Dust kicked up under the wheels. Jess slammed the shifter into park and twisted around in her seat. The black truck coasted forward, silent. The dust didn't even move as it passed over. It didn't slow down, didn't stop. It kept coming. Cody reached over and grabbed her hand. "Start the car. It's already on." "No, like rev it. Let's go." But before Jess could throw it back into gear, the black truck reached them and passed straight through their car like fog parting in moonlight. Not over. Not under. Not around. Through. Jess gasped. The cold hit her chest like falling in a winter lake. Her eyes blurred. Cody jerked as if he'd been punched in the gut. And then the black truck was gone. Just vanished. No taillights, no tires. Not even a scent of exhaust. It simply blinked out on the other side of the road like it had never been there. Jess twisted the key. The engine coughed once, twice. Then silence. "No, no, no," she muttered, cranking harder. The dashboard was dead. The battery gauge flatlined. No interior lights, no music. Just the slow creak of the cooling engine and Cody whispering prayers. Under his breath, they sat there for a minute, maybe more. Neither spoke, neither moved. The road was empty again. But the air? It wasn't right. It felt wrong. Still. Too still. Like the night had stopped breathing. Finally, Cody got out, popped the hood. Jess stayed behind the wheel, trying the ignition again and again until her fingers cramped out outside. Cody stared at the engine. Everything looked fine, but it didn't feel fine. The air under the hood was ice cold, like the block had been sitting in a freezer, not running 90 a few minutes ago. "I don't like this," he said again. Jess didn't reply. She was looking at something in the mirror. Just behind them, about 30 feet back, something glinted. She stepped out and walked slowly toward it, flashlight shaking in her grip. It was a license plate, half buried in the shoulder dirt, bent and rusted, black on black. No letters, no numbers. Just a smooth metal rectangle, darker than night. She looked up the road. Still no sign of the truck. She picked up the plate. It was cold. Too cold. Her hands went numb where she held it, and the numbness spread fast up her wrists, her arms. "Jess!" Cody shouted from the car. "Stop!" She dropped the plate. The numbness stopped too. They didn't say much after that. Just sat in the car till sunrise, locked in silence, too afraid to leave, too afraid to sleep. When the sun finally rose and the birds started chirping again, the car started like nothing had ever been wrong. They drove the rest of the way in silence. Jess never took Highway 163 again. Sold the car a week later, but sometimes, when she drives at night, even years later, she checks the mirror. And every now and then, on a quiet road with no traffic and no wind, she sees it again. The black truck. Trailing her. Silent as the grave. It was one of those drives where the road starts to feel like it's wrapping around itself. Endless stretches of two-lane blacktop, the kind that cuts through nothing but stubborn Texas scrubland, with brittle grass and thorny mesquite trees clawing toward a moon too tired to shine. Mason kept one hand on the wheel. The other wrapped around a gas station burrito that had turned cold somewhere between Wichita Falls and nowhere. Amanda was asleep, her head against the passenger side window, breath fogging the glass and slow. Rhythms. They'd been arguing earlier, something dumb, like whether to stop at a motel or keep driving, but exhaustion has a way of quieting people. Mason had chosen to push through, though his eyes were starting to betray him, blinking longer than they should. Headlights of oncoming trucks blooming too wide in his vision. He didn't remember seeing the old gas station sign until it flickered. Right there on the side of the road, half eclipsed by a leaning oak and buzzing with static light. It looked abandoned but not ruined, like it had been preserved in a kind of stasis. The pump stood like rusted sentries, no hoses, no prices. A single bulb dangled from a bent overhang, casting a tired yellow glow over cracked concrete and dirt. Mason slowed down without thinking. He didn't want to sleep in a motel, didn't want to fight about it. This was better. Quiet. Off the road just enough. He pulled the car beside the station and killed the engine. Amanda stirred and muttered something like, "Where are we?" but then curled back into herself. Mason tilted his seat back. The night folded over them, warm and still, with the quiet hum of insects and the occasional chirp of a far-off nightbird. The last thing he remembered was the way the station looked out the windshield, like a photograph from another time. Colors all washed out and edges soft, almost like it was waiting for someone. He woke up sweating. It was morning, or close to it, a sharp, dry heat filtering through the windshield, the kind that bakes you through the glass. Mason rubbed his eyes and looked around. His stomach dropped. There was no gas station. No pumps, no sign. No concrete. Just dirt and brush, wild and sun-blasted, stretching out in every direction like they'd parked in the middle of a cattle trail and slept through a dust storm. Amanda sat up next to him, blinking, then frowned. "Where the hell are we?" Mason opened the door. Dust puffed under his boots. He walked around the car, eyes scanning the landscape. Nothing man-made in sight. No tire tracks. No gravel. No flattened grass from the wheels. Just wild raw mesquite and dry soil cracked like old skin. Even the road was gone. No shoulder. No dividing lines. Just brush and open land where pavement had been last night. Amanda's voice rose behind him. "This isn't funny." He turned and shook his head slowly. "I'm not joking." They both pulled out their phones. No bars, no GPS pin. Just that spinning wheel of uncertainty. Mason tried to load the map history. It showed a straight line, no stops, no deviations. They should be 5 miles east of some town called Haskell, but there was no town, no road, no trace of anything. Amanda stood there, arms crossed tight, her mouth set in that line that meant she was scared but wouldn't say it. "This doesn't make sense," she said, looking around. "We parked right next to a building. There was a light. I saw it." "So?" "Did I?" Mason said. "I saw it." They got back in the car and started driving, slow at first, wheels crunching through wild brush. The car bucked and bounced over hard earth, Mason gripping the wheel tighter, following what he thought might have been a path. But the sun kept rising and the land kept stretching, and there was no sign of a road, no mailboxes, no fences. No signs, nothing to mark that anyone had ever lived here or even passed through. After 30 minutes, Amanda reached for the radio and clicked it on. Static. Every channel. Not even the faint garble of a distant preacher or farm report. Just white noise. "Do you think we're dreaming?" she asked finally. "No," Mason said, "but I think something's wrong." He stopped the car and got out again. This time, he walked farther, leaving Amanda behind. The air felt thick, like it was pressing against his skin. Not hot, just heavy, like swimming in warm syrup. He Walked until he couldn't see the car anymore. Just the scrub and dust and the same crooked tree repeating over and over. It was the tree that stopped him. He realized he'd passed it 3 times. The same bend in the trunk, same ragged limb jutting toward the sky like a crooked finger. He turned in a slow circle and saw nothing else but sky and land in every direction. When he got back, Amanda was crying. She had both phones on the dash, tapping the screens like force could fix it. Mason didn't know what to say. He put his hand on hers, and she gripped it hard, her eyes wide and unfocused. "We need to go," she whispered. "Just go." So? They did. He put the car in drive and picked a direction. Any direction. The tires tore through brush, scattering jackrabbits and dust devils, and they didn't look back. But an hour later, when they crested a ridge, Mason hit the brakes and stared. There it was again. The gas station, exactly as it had been. Same rusted pumps, same crooked sign. Same light hanging from the canopy, even though there was no power line. Amanda gasped. Mason stared. "That's where we stopped last night," she said. "I know. But we just drove in the opposite direction. I know." He turned the wheel, drove past it this time, didn't stop. The station stood like a mirage, edges flickering in the heat, and then it was behind them. Only a WSN single quotes to 10 minutes. Later, they saw it again. Exactly the same. Amanda began to scream. Mason didn't say a word, just gritted his teeth and kept driving. They passed it 5 times. 10. Once they stopped and tried to walk away from the car together in a straight line, leaving marks in the dirt behind them. But after 20 minutes, they were standing right in front of it again. Amanda collapsed onto the hood and started to sob, low and shaking. That's when Mason saw the man inside the station. Through the cracked window. He stood still, like he was part of the wall, skin the color of wax, eyes sunken deep and dry. Just watching, not moving, not blinking. Mason shouted. Amanda turned. But when she looked, he was gone. They never got back to the road. They drove until they ran out of gas, then walked. The land never changed. No birds, no insects, no sky shifts. The sun hovered high and hot, but it never moved. Never dipped or slid or softened. They stopped tracking the days. Their phones died. Their mouths cracked. Their words dried up. But the station never went away. It watched. It waited. And sometimes, when the wind blew just right, Amanda swore she could hear the hum of a light bulb somewhere in the brush, flickering overhead. Years later, the car was found, rusted, half buried in dust outside of Anson. No road nearby. No sign of a station. The GPS showed a clean route. No stops. No deviations. And no one ever found Mason or Amanda. Only a smudge on the windshield, like a hand pressed from the inside, still clinging to the glass. The man had been driving eastbound on Highway 183, skirting the shadowy edges of hill country as dusk slipped into a full-on July night. The heat was still trapped in the pavement, and the cicadas outside buzzed like some broken electric fence. Troy wasn't in a rush, just making his way from a dead job in Llano to a maybe job out near Cuero. He figured he'd sleep in the truck that night, had a blanket rolled up behind the seat, and half a bottle of Coke left in the console butt. Then the low fuel light blinked on. He cursed and leaned forward like that might make the gauge change its mind. It didn't. The road stretched out like it always did, long and quiet and empty, and his last glance at the green exit sign said nothing about services for the next 30 miles. Then, as he crested a little hill where the scrub brush thinned, out into open pasture land, he spotted it. A gas station. Well-lit, old-fashioned canopy. Sign read Duke's 24/7s. There hadn't been a Duke's there yesterday. he would have noticed. Troy'd been through that stretch twice in the last week and hadn't seen anything but barbed wire and dust. But there it was now, just off the shoulder, all yellow glow and inviting hum. It even had one of those glass vending machines out. Front, the kind that used to be in front of Woolworth's back in the day. He pulled in slow, scanning for other cars none. The pumps looked old, really old. Mechanical rollers instead of digital readouts, faded stickers with gas prices that felt suspiciously low. $2.15 for regular in this economy? Troy got out and the air smelled faintly of old diesel and something. Sweeter maybe honeysuckle, maybe antifreeze. It was hard to tell. The station looked like it belonged in a movie from the early 90s. The sign above the glass door read, "Open all night." And behind the counter sat a man in a plaid shirt, flipping through a paperback western like he'd been doing it since. The first Bush administration. Troy pumped his gas. The nozzle clicked off right at $20, and the total spun to $19.98. He went inside, letting the door's bell chime overhead. Cool air hit him with a hint of cigarette smoke and pine sol. Cashier didn't look up from his book. "Fill up?" "Yeah, pump 2. The guy tapped the register, which wasn't a touch screen, just an old NCR with those beige plastic buttons and a sticky drawer that squeaked when it opened. Troy handed over a 20 and got back 2 cents and a paper receipt that felt too thick, like it had been printed on the back of a flyer. He glanced at the change. A penny with Lincoln's face all dark and worn and a 1996 stamped on the back. Not a big deal, except the other was a wheat penny. No Lincoln memorial, just those. Twin stalks and a 1953 date. He hadn't seen one of those since his grandpa's coin jar. "Y'all just open up here?" he asked, squinting at the walls. The drink coolers were full but labeled with Old Logos Surge, Crystal Pepsi, and even Josta, a rotating hot dog. Roller looked like it hadn't moved in 20 years. The man behind the counter shrugged. "Been here a while. People just don't always see us." That made Troy pause. "Come again?" "Depends when you're looking." The cashier smiled without teeth. "Nights when we're clearest." Troy offered a polite half laugh, folded the receipt into his wallet, and walked back out to the truck. The lights from the canopy made everything glow a little yellow, like an old photo. As he started the engine, he saw a dog sitting by the edge of the property, watching him. Black fur, one eye cloudy. Just sitting there. Staring. He drove off with the windows up, suddenly colder than the night should have been. 10 miles later, when he stopped to pee behind a closed feed store, he pulled out the receipt again and frowned. The ink had already started to fade, like the cheap kind that disappears after sunlight hits it. But it wasn't even midnight. In the faint glow of his dome light, the words Duke's 24/7's fuel were smudged and ghostly. The time stamp read, the 2nd of July 96, 10:04 p.m. Troy blinked. That wasn't possible. He rubbed it with his thumb and watched the letters vanish like ash under breath. By the time he got back to the main road, there was nothing left but a blank square of curling paper. The next night, curiosity gnawed at him like a raccoon behind the walls. He didn't mean to go back. He told himself it wasn't worth the gas. But somewhere around 9:15, he found himself back on 183, tracing the road like a map drawn in muscle memory. Same stretch of scrub brush, same hills, same cicadas. No station. He slowed at the spot. Turned on his BRIGHTS. Nothing. Just cracked asphalt and a burned-out foundation, half choked with weeds. The kind of ruin you see in towns that died before. Your parents were born. Blackened concrete. Twisted steel bars where a signpost had once stood. A mangled gas pump half swallowed by dirt. No lights, no windows. No Dukes. Troy parked on the shoulder and got out. The air was dead quiet. Not even bugs. The ground felt wrong under his boots, soft in some places, too dry in others. Like the earth couldn't decide whether to swallow or spit. He stepped over a piece of scorched metal and looked down. There, half buried in the dirt, was something familiar. A fragment of receipt paper. Only a sliver, but the curl of the font was just like before. The 2nd of July 96 was still visible, burned into the corner like it had been branded. The rest had turned to ash. He turned around to leave and stopped cold. The dog was there. Same black fur. Same cloudy eye. Sitting perfectly still by the passenger door of his truck. Except this time, it wasn't alone. A man stood beside it, backlit by nothing, tall and motionless. His clothes were out of time. Denim overalls, a long-sleeved work shirt, and a feed cap with a faded Texaco logo. His face was wrong, too smooth, too pale, like it hadn't been finished. No mouth. Just folds of skin that pulsed like something underneath wanted out. Troy didn't remember running to the truck, only that the keys were already in his hand, and he was screaming before the engine caught. He peeled out hard enough to fishtail, and didn't slow down until he hit the first diner past Cuero, where he sat in the parking lot with the engine running and hands shaking too bad to hold his Coke bottle. He went back one more time. A week later, just to be sure, and there was nothing. No pump, no foundation, not even the scorch marks, just grass. Smooth, like it had never been disturbed. But sometimes at night, when he's driving long stretches and hasn't seen another car, for an hour, he glances down at the change in his cup holder. That 1996 penny is still there. He tries to toss it sometimes. He swears he's done it. Thrown it out the window. Left it at a rest stop. Dropped it in a donation jar. But it's always back in the same place the next time he looks. Always heads up. And sometimes, when the moon's out just right and the road goes quiet as a whisper, he swears he hears the faint squeal of a pump handle returning to the cradle, followed by the soft, wet pant of a dog breathing behind the seat. The first time Mark saw the hitchhiker was somewhere outside San Angelo, just past a rusted cattle gate that leaned like an old drunk into a post hole. It was the kind of road where every bump felt like it jarred something loose in your spine. A back route that only folks who hated the interstate or had something to avoid would ever take. Mark had taken it because he liked the quiet. No cameras. No rest stops full of fluorescent light. Just scrubland, mesquite brush, and enough. Silence to let you forget about the kind of things you weren't supposed to think about. The man standing there looked ordinary at first. Lean build. Faded denim. A threadbare army surplus jacket despite the Texas heat. His thumb was out, and his face was mostly hidden under the brim of a dusty ball cap, like a man who didn't want to be remembered too clearly. Mark slowed out of instinct, rolling down the window just a crack. The man stepped forward with a smile that was polite but unreadable, like someone rehearsing friendliness but not feeling it. "Thanks again," the man said. Mark blinked. "For what?" "For stopping," the hitchhiker replied, eyes not quite meeting his. "I was here before, remember?" Mark looked around. Dust swirled gently off the shoulder. No other cars in sight. He glanced at the man again and said, "I don't think I've been down this road in years." "You have," the man said softly. "You just forgot. You left me here last time. But this time, I'm staying." Something in the way he said it scraped across Mark's nerves like nails on metal. But before he could say no, before he could even process why his pulse had quickened, the man opened the passenger door and got in like it was already settled. Mark didn't argue. He just started driving again, one hand loosely on the wheel, the other tapping against his jeans like it was trying to signal something his brain hadn't yet worked out. The hitchhiker didn't say much, just stared out the window as the low hills rolled past in the distance and heat shimmered on the pavement. His presence filled the cab of the truck in a way that made it feel too tight, like the air had thickened. Mark tried to make small talk. Where? You headed? The man smiled slightly. Not far. You live out here? A pause. Then, I'm going home. Mark glanced at him. That so? Where's home? The hitchhiker turned then, slowly, and his eyes met Mark's in a way that made the road ahead blur. Where you left me. The air in the cab dropped 10 degrees. Mark felt it like opening a walk-in freezer. His skin prickled, but he forced a smile. Sorry, man. You must have me confused with someone else. The hitchhiker looked away again. You told me the same thing last time. That was enough. Mark cleared his throat, shifted in his seat, and glanced at the gas gauge. He decided to drop the guy off at the next town, wherever that was. He just needed a reason. But as the minutes passed, something strange started happening. The landmarks began repeating. A water tower in the shape of a pear. A half-burned barn with a collapsed roof. An old billboard for Shiner beer with half the paint worn off. Mark knew Texas roads could be repetitive, but this wasn't that. This was the exact same stretch of road. 3 times. He slowed the truck, heart pounding now. You seeing this? He asked. The hitchhiker nodded. You're coming back around. You always do. Mark stopped the truck. Dust blew across the hood and curled around the side mirrors. The engine ticked quietly in the silence. He turned to the man in the passenger seat. All right. Who the hell are you? The hitchhiker's smile returned. It was too calm. You want the truth? Mark hesitated. Yeah, I was in the back seat, the man said. 3 years ago. Your truck looked different then. You were coming back. From Lubbock, drunk and pissed, swerving. You didn't see me step out of the mesquite until it was too late. Mark's mouth went dry. His hands gripped the wheel hard enough to ache. You're lying. No, the man said. You hit me hard. I remember the crunch. My ribs folded in. You stopped for a second. You looked back. You waited. Then you drove. Mark felt his throat close. Images flickered. A night he'd buried deep. A figure maybe. A deer. Maybe something else there one moment. Gone the next in his rearview mirror. Blood on the fender he'd washed off without thinking too hard about it. The way his hand shook at the wheel all the way home. The silence he'd wrapped around it like a warm blanket. You ... You couldn't have survived that. I didn't. The man said, voice flat. The silence that followed was loud. Deafening. Mark's mind raced, looking for a way out. A way to make it all make sense. Maybe this guy had heard something. Maybe he was messing with him. But the cold in the cab said, different. The lack of reflection in the side mirror said different. The fact that Mark hadn't seen another car for over an hour, that said it all. I'm sorry, he said quietly, not sure who he was talking to anymore. I didn't mean to, but you did, the hitchhiker said. And now I'm not getting out. Mark turned off the engine. The world outside stood still, like a frozen photograph. No birds, no wind. No cicadas buzzing in the heat. He opened the door and stepped out, needing air, needing space. But the second his boots hit the dirt, the world shifted again. The cattle gate was back, the same one, the same angle. The same broken post. The same dented beer can lying in the grass. He turned around. The truck was gone. So was the hitchhiker. Just wide Texas land in every direction and the sound of blood pounding in his ears. Then a voice behind him, too close, whispered, You're the one hitchhiking now. Mark spun around, but there was no one there. Just his own shadow on the dirt, long and twitching like it didn't quite belong to him. And then headlights. Coming up the road. He raised a hand, just a little, not because he wanted to, because he had to, because something, deep and wrong and older. Then guilt was now sewn into his bones. The approaching car slowed. Inside, a man looked out, confused. Mark smiled. "Thanks again," he said. And got in. The stretch of Highway 81 that cuts through Nolan County, Texas, isn't much to look at. Dry scrub brush, wire fences sagging from the weight of decades, a rusted-out billboard for a defunct truck stop advertising fresh pie and hot coffee. Hangs on a tilt, shot up with bullet holes. But just past mile 201, where the road dips briefly and a crumbling overpass shadows the lanes, something changes. People used to say it was just coincidence. The radio glitch, the phones freezing up, that wave of heat that feels like you've been hit with a blowtorch even though it's midnight. But those who've passed under it more than once, they know better, especially the truckers. They don't talk about it openly, but they know to switch to CD, turn off the CB, and speed up. Never linger. Derek Vasquez wasn't from around there. San Antonio born, Austin raised, he prided himself on skepticism and sharp edges. At 28, he was a content creator who'd made his brand on the fringes, abandoned buildings, urban legends, the kind of stuff that got Reddit threads buzzing and TikTok teenagers gasping. He ran a channel called Into the Static, known for real-time explorations of places people warned him not to go. And that's exactly why he took the detour. It was early June. Thick heat, long daylight hours. He'd been headed to Lubbock for a shoot some derelict cotton mill people swore was haunted. But a local gas station clerk in Sweetwater had leaned in and told him, in a voice too low to be casual, about the Screaming Mile. Said if Derek was really about that ghost hunter life, he should try passing under the old county overpass around 2:30 a.m. That's when it gets loud, the man said. But only on the inside. That was all Derek needed. He parked his rented Camry off the highway a few hours before, set up 3 dash cams, and mounted a GoPro on his chest. He wasn't live streaming, cell reception out there was a joke. But he planned to upload raw footage with minimal edits. Authenticity was his selling point. That and the fact he went where others wouldn't. At 2:10 a.m., he pulled back onto the road. Dead silence. Even the wind had quieted. The stars above looked smeared, like someone had pressed their thumb against the sky. He saw the overpass looming, gray and brittle, like it had been forgotten mid-collapse. Moss clung to its underside. Despite the drought, and one of the concrete guardrails had crumbled, spilling pebbles onto the shoulder. Derek's fingers hovered over the stereo, controls. He didn't have to touch a thing. The moment his headlights passed under the overpass, every speaker in the car exploded with static. Not white noise, not. At first, but deep, layered screams. Like 1,000 voices trying to shout over each other. It didn't rise or fall. It hit all at once, like a punch. The kind of sound that makes your molars ache. Derek jerked in his seat, instinctively slamming on the brakes, but the car didn't slow. The pedal was stiff. Locked. He fumbled for the volume knob, but it spun freely, no resistance. His phone lit up by itself, the lock screen fluttering. Like a broken film reel, apps opened and closed. The flashlight blinked. And in the middle of it all, the screams rose to a pitch so sharp it felt like needles threading through his skull. Then the headlights flickered, and something moved above him. Fast. Not across the road, not inside the car, above on the overpass. Something impossibly large, moving in a way that bent the light around it, leaving a rippling shadow behind. Derek's breath hitched. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. The GoPro on his chest whined, an electronic squeal like it was dying. And then, all at once, the sound cut out. Total silence. The car jolted, like it had skipped forward a foot. Derek blinked. He was a half-mile past the overpass. His hands were shaking, slick with sweat. The dashboard read 2:13 a.m., just like before. No time had passed, or all of it had. He didn't know. He pulled onto the shoulder, got out, and immediately vomited into the grass. His ears rang like someone had fired a gun next to his head. The air smelled of ozone and something metallic, not blood, but close. He turned to look back. The overpass loomed in the dark, still and quiet. No movement, no traffic. Just the wind finally returning in long, warm gusts. He grabbed his phone, still working, barely. He opened his video app and uploaded a 10-second clip, raw, no caption, just the sound of the screaming and a flicker of the shadow above. He hit post, and his car began to smoke that it started under the hood, a thin hiss like water on a skillet. Then the windshield cracked right down the middle. The GoPro's battery exploded on his chest with a pop, sending shards of plastic into his jacket. Derek screamed and stumbled away as the car's headlights flared to life, even though he'd pulled the key. One of the dash cams caught fire, then the upholstery died in less than a minute. The Camry was engulfed. He stood 20 feet back, shaking, mouth open, as the fire department never came. There was no signal again, not even SOS. The next morning, the shell of the car was still there, but the phone was gone. Someone, or something, had taken it. The upload, though, had gone live. Only a few seconds, but enough. The comments exploded. People said it was fake, CGI, voice filters. Others swore they'd heard that same scream under that same overpass. A few claimed they'd lost time. One woman said she passed under it last summer and didn't remember the next hour. Just woke up parked outside her ex's house. Blood on her shirt? No clue how she got there. But most disturbing was the handful of comments that simply said, "Don't post this again. Take it down. You let it out." Derek tried to move on. He made other videos, tried to pivot his channel to safer, sillier content. He joked about the overpass, called it a prank, said he faked it. But every now and then, when he'd drive late at night, his radio would start hissing, then screaming, even when he was nowhere near. Mile 201. Even in cities. Even with the car off. Once, walking through a parking garage in Dallas, the emergency broadcast system on a parked Ford pickup crackled to life and played his own voice. Slowed down backwards. He stopped filming after that. As for the overpass, it's still there. Still crumbling. Still empty. But every few weeks, someone else uploads a new clip. Always the same. A burst of screaming, then the silence. The burned out car, a shadow no one can describe without shaking. And still, the views keep rising. People want to see it. They don't understand yet that the sound isn't just in the video. It's waiting, and it knows who listened. The fog rolled in like spilled milk across the asphalt, not drifting down from the sky, but creeping along the blacktop like it had poured out of some crack in the road. High above, the stars blinked clear and unbothered. There wasn't a cloud in sight, not even a wisp. Just that fog, low and thick, hugging the road so tightly it looked like it was shrink-wrapping the world. Dylan sat up straighter in the driver's seat and lifted his foot off the gas just a little. Mile marker 138, somewhere south of Eden, Texas. He had maybe 3 hours to go before Laredo, and the late-night haul had been smooth, boring even, until now. At first, he figured it was just a valley mist. He'd seen that before, especially in the hill country. A low patch of haze, some freak of humidity and terrain. No need to panic. But when the edge of it touched the front bumper, the radio cut out. Not static, just ... off, like someone had flipped a switch. The soft hum of the engine was still there, and the dashboard lights glowed green and steady. But his music, the same scratchy ZZ Top CD he always played on lonely drives, just died mid-chorus. Then his phone went dark. No bars, no Wi-Fi. Bluetooth dropped like it had never been connected. Not even the clock at the top of the screen worked anymore. Just frozen. He slowed to a crawl, headlights cutting a wall of white so dense it looked solid. Then, after a second of hesitation, he did what he shouldn't have done. He went in. The moment his truck crossed fully into the fog, everything changed. The sound of the tires on the asphalt disappeared. No wind outside. No bugs on the windshield. No night sounds at all. The fog swallowed everything, not just light but sound too. Like the air itself had thickened into something heavier, quieter. A pressure formed in his ears, like diving too deep too fast. He swallowed hard, tried to pop them, but it didn't help. He opened the window. Dead silence. Not even the rush of air as they cruised along. It felt like driving through a vacuum. The first flicker of fear hit when he checked the mirror and saw nothing. Not the road. Not the trailer he was hauling. Not the lights on his own rig. Just a smear of white, like someone had scraped a white crayon across the glass. He adjusted the side mirrors. Same thing. All gone. He reached for the radio knob, twisting it, flipping buttons. Nothing. He tapped the dash, then his phone again. Still dead. The GPS map didn't even show the blue dot anymore. It was just a blank grid. He muttered to himself, something about cell towers and Texas backroads, trying to keep calm. But the panic started crawling up his spine like something alive. He floored it. The tires caught and the truck surged forward, engine humming louder. The high beams stabbed into the fog, but they didn't cut it. They lit it up from inside, making it even harder to see, like trying to look through a glass of milk. The mile markers had vanished. The road felt endless. And even with the pedal down hard, it felt like he wasn't getting anywhere. He stared at the odometer. It ticked up like normal. So did the dashboard clock. But time felt wrong, stretched, still, empty. His breathing got heavy, too loud in the silence. He blinked and shook his head, tried to hum, then talk out loud. Nothing. Sounded right. His voice was thin, like it didn't want to leave his throat. He yelled just to hear himself and ended up coughing. The cab felt too small, too hot. Like the fog wasn't outside anymore, but pressing in, leaking through the vents, wrapping around his skin. Then came the banging. Soft at first, like someone tapping on the side of the truck. Then harder, a rhythmic thudding near the back of the cab. He twisted in his seat. Nothing there. Looked in the mirror again, still white. The sound stopped. He kept driving, then it started again. On the other side this time, thud, thud. His hands gripped the wheel until his knuckles cracked. He told himself it was a branch or a rock kicked up from the tires, but deep down he knew better. The banging wasn't outside. It was inside, behind the wall of the sleeper cab. He swerved once, jerking the wheel to the right, and the tires chirped against the shoulder, but there was no rumble strip. No gravel. No change in motion. Just smooth, infinite blacktop under a blanket of white. And then, like someone flipping a page in a book, it was gone. The fog vanished in an instant. No slow fade, no thinning. Just not there anymore. The stars were back. The road stretched out in both directions. The air moved again. Bugs chirped from the grass. His radio buzzed to life mid-song. Phone lit up with 3 missed messages, and the GPS blinked as if waking from sleep. He slammed on the brakes. Tires squealed, and the truck fishtailed just a little before coming to a stop. His hands were trembling. Sweat dripped from his forehead. He threw open the door and jumped down onto the road, breathing hard. He looked around. Mile marker 138. Exactly where he'd entered. He walked in a slow circle, scanning the ditches, the fence line, the trees. Nothing. Unusual. No fog, not even a breeze. He glanced back at the truck, still idling, trailer intact. Everything looked fine, except a WASN single quotes T'd out the clock on his dash said 3:42 a.m. He'd entered the fog at 2:38. He checked his phone's call log. It agreed. Over an hour had passed, but he hadn't moved. The odometer showed a 1 mile difference, and he could still see the reflector post for mile marker 138 just up the road. He had driven hard for an hour and hadn't gone anywhere. Dylan climbed back into the cab slowly, his legs unsteady. He pulled forward 20 feet, stopped again, and put the truck in park. Reached back to open the curtain on the sleeper. Nothing. There'd no signs of life. No marks. No banging. Just the same rumpled blanket and old coffee thermos. He sat a long while before pulling back onto the road. He drove the rest of the way to Laredo with the radio off, headlights low, never braking. 55. He didn't tell anyone about it. Not the other drivers at the drop yard, not his dispatcher, not even his wife when she called later that morning. He just said the road was long and boring, and he was tired. But 2 weeks later, on a different route, he heard a story on the CB. Another trucker, same area, just south of Eden, talked about a white fog that didn't behave like fog should. How his clock stopped and his engine stuttered. How he came out an hour later, still on the same stretch of blacktop. Dylan didn't say a word. He just turned the volume down and kept his eyes on the road. But he avoids mile marker 138 now. Always takes the detour, even if it adds an hour. He doesn't care, because he still dreams about that fog. About how it wrapped around him like plastic, sealing the world away. How it felt like something watching, not with eyes, but with presence. Like being noticed by the air itself. And sometimes, when he's driving alone at night, he swears he can see it waiting just ahead. Flat on the road, unmoving, like a puddle of spilled milk waiting to be stepped in. And he knows, deep down, in the bones he never talks about, that if he drives into it again, he won't come out the other side. Not this time. This time, it'll wrap tighter, seal harder. Keep him. It was the kind of Texas night that sweats through your shirt even if you're standing still. Mid-July, moon hanging low over a stretch of nowhere between San Angelo and El Dorado, where the roads stop pretending to be part of any map and start behaving like they've got a mind of their own. Darren Whitlock had made this haul a dozen times before, trucking pipe down from Midland for a crew working a new rig past. Devil's Draw. He knew the curves by muscle memory. He didn't need the GPS anymore. Hell, half the time he turned the damn thing off because it lost signal somewhere past Cristoval anyway. But there was one bend, a lazy swoop near the edge of some mesquite-dense lowland that always sat wrong with him. He never noticed it much in daylight. But at night, it had a presence. They didn't call it anything official, not on any dot record or route log. But other truckers whispered about it over coffee and diesel slick counters. The curve with no name, the mile marker got stolen too often for TXDOT to bother replacing it. Local dispatchers just referred to it as that mile after the switchback. But drivers, real drivers, the ones who kept thermoses of black coffee like lifelines and had dead friends on their forearms in ink, they had their own name for it, the Bell Mile. Because every night, if you were unlucky or just stupid enough to be on it at exactly midnight, you'd hear it, a bell. Just once, clean. No echo. Like a school bell, maybe, or the kind they used in churches before everything went digital and sad. And then silence. Not just the absence of noise, but silence that swelled like something alive, thick enough to hear your own heart thudding against the cab glass. Long enough that you'd feel your own breath turn into a question. Darren had always shrugged it off. Ghost stories and bullshit, the way old truckers like to scare greenhorns. He'd seen worse driven through real hell, through Arkansas. Ice storms, desert monsoons near Deming. Once even passed a man burning in a wrecked sedan on the I-10 with no sign of a fire truck for 40 miles. There wasn't much that fazed him anymore. But that night, the one where the engine coughed right before the curve, where the road got too quiet and the hair on his arm started to rise without cause, that night changed something. It started with the air. It turned cold, not cool. Not breeze through the window cold. Just wrong. Dead air in a place that didn't know cold in July. He reached to turn off the AC, but it was already off. He tapped the dash. The vents hissed warm, like breath from a sick dog. And then, just as the truck leaned into that nameless bend, it rang. Darren flinched. It was louder than he expected. Not shrill, just sharp. Like it had been struck from inside his own cab. But it hadn't. He looked around. Nothing. Just the road curving gently, no lights, no markers, nothing but a rusted barbed wire fence trailing the edge of the ditch, like a scar. Then the silence. No tires against pavement. No wind outside. The radio, which had been mumbling something from a San Angelo talk station, cut off mid-word. It was like someone had vacuumed all the noise out of the world. Darren's ears started to buzz. In that way they do when there's pressure building behind your eardrums, like altitude sickness or a plane going down. He opened his mouth, tried to say something, couldn't hear his own voice, and in that silence the shadows moved, not clearly, not in any way he could track. But the brush on the side of the road twisted. The mesquites leaned. The outline of the fence seemed to shift in slow, impossible ways. It was like watching time skip a frame, then two. Darren blinked, hard, gripped the wheel. He didn't stop. He didn't brake. That was the rule. You don't stop on the bell. Mile, not even for a blowout. Every man who had, well, not many of them were still around to talk about it. He made it past. The silence snapped like a rubber band. The radio stuttered back to life. The road got noisy again. Crickets, the engine, the rattle of something unsecured in the trailer. Darren kept driving. He didn't look back. The next morning he told no one, offloaded the pipe, grabbed a motel room near El Dorado, sat in the dark with the TV turned to static. Didn't sleep, but the next week he took the route again. Same time, same run. This time he made sure he passed the curve at 11:50. Just to be safe, still heard the bell. This time though, it wasn't alone. It was followed by a voice. It didn't come from the radio. It came from the space beside him. The empty passenger seat, clear as day. A whisper that came like warm breath in winter. Back again. He jerked the wheel, almost clipped a mesquite. The tires screamed. The engine choked. He forced the truck straight. Hard THUDDING. Nothing in the seat. Nothing in the mirrors. But he knew something had hitched a ride. He didn't drive again. For a month, but bills pile up. And fear doesn't pay for tires or gas. So he returned. Each time, the bell rang. And each time, something new happened. A flash of a figure in the ditch, long hair. Barefoot. A row of candles in the middle of the road, gone when his lights hit them. The sound of sobbing that faded only when he turned off the engine and waited in the dark. It became a routine. He couldn't stop himself. Like an itch on the inside of the skull, he started writing the dates down. Every time the bell rang. Every time something changed. And on July 15th, exactly 1 year after the first ring, he stopped at the mile. On purpose. Stepped out of the cab. Midnight. On the ... it was the silence that greeted him first. Of course. Deeper than any cave. Heavier than stone. Than the bell. It rang from the ditch this time. He turned and saw them. Dozens. Maybe more. Figures, all standing still. Men, women, children, some with blank faces, some that looked familiar. Too familiar. The woman from the photo in his glove box. The boy he'd hit in Amarillo 15 years ago and never told anyone about. A man he remembered from the war, burned, twisted, mouth still open in that final scream. They watched, not accusing. Just waiting. And then a little girl stepped forward. Eyes black as spilled oil, hair hanging wet. "You stopped," she said. "Now you don't leave." Darren tried to run. Couldn't. Tried to scream. Couldn't. They surrounded him without moving. The silence thickened, wrapped around him like plastic. Pressed against his mouth, into his ears, down his throat. He was never found. Only the rig, still idling at the side of the bell mile. Radio hissing static. And from the brush, if you pass by real slow and cut your lights, you might hear it. The bell, and a breath behind your shoulder saying, "Thanks for stopping. We've been waiting." It was just after 11 p.m. when Curtis pulled the old Ford off the shoulder of FM 1660 to check the rear tire. Something hadn't felt right for the past couple of miles, not a full-blown flat, just that wobble you feel through the wheel like the truck's riding on jello. His daughter, Emily, was asleep in the back seat with a pillow wedged against the window, and he didn't want to wake her. The radio played some slow country tune too low to catch the lyrics, but it filled the silence just enough to keep him company. The air was thick with heat, not the dry kind you get out in West Texas, but the heavy, wet kind that clings to your neck and makes the dust stick to your skin like paste. Fireflies blinked near the edge of the woods. A barbed wire fence stretched across the field beside them, sagging in places where deer or cows had leaned against it too many times. He clicked on the flashlight, popped the door, and stepped out. Gravel crunched under his boots. As he walked toward the back, that's when he saw her. At first, he thought it was just a trick of the light, maybe heat rising off the road, bending shadows in strange ways. But the shape didn't shimmer or waver. It moved. A woman, barefoot, walking along the ditch on the opposite side of the road. Not walking, exactly. She was stepping backward, slow, deliberate steps. Her arms hung loose at her sides, and her long black hair swayed as she moved, catching the moonlight just enough to shimmer. She wore a dress that might have once been white, but it was streaked brown and gray from the road. Her feet scraped gently across the gravel with each backward shuffle. Curtis just froze, the flashlight dangling useless in his hand. She was whispering something. He couldn't make out the words. They weren't loud enough, but the rhythm was there, a murmur like a broken song. The same words, over and over, like a chant or a prayer with no hope left in it. "Ma'am?" He called before he realized it. She didn't stop. Didn't flinch. She didn't even look at him. Just kept walking backward into the dark. He felt the sudden pull in his chest. Like gravity had tilted the world slightly sideways and all the fear in his stomach shifted at once. Curtis wasn't the kind of man to scare easy. 20 years fixing busted oil rigs and driving equipment across the backroads of Texas taught him how to handle rough weather and rougher people. But this ... he turned fast, got back in the truck, and started it without even checking the tire. Emily stirred, blinking grudgingly. "What's wrong?" He didn't answer right away. Just merged back onto the road and tried to keep the truck steady. After a minute, she sat up straighter and looked out the rear window. Was it that lady again? Curtis gripped the wheel tighter. "What lady?" Emily yawned, still half asleep. "The one walking backward. I saw her earlier today, by that gas station we stopped at around 7. She was across the highway." Curtis glanced at the rearview mirror. Nothing but road and dust and moonlight. "Are you sure?" She nodded slowly. She was wearing that same dress. It looked dirty, like it used to be white. She was whispering, too. Curtis didn't respond. He just stared straight ahead and pushed the truck 5 miles over the limit. The thing was, that gas station had been near Lockhart. They were now closer to Hearn, 50 miles up the road. That was impossible. Unless she'd hitched a ride. But he hadn't passed any cars. No rides, no turnoffs, nothing. Just empty fields and silent fences. He didn't sleep much that night. They stayed at a cheap roadside motel with an ice machine that wheezed like it was dying and air conditioning. That stank of mildew. Emily fell asleep fast, her arms tucked around a stuffed raccoon she'd had since she was 6. But Curtis sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the blinds. At one point, he pulled them back and looked out into the parking lot. Nothing. But his eyes drifted to the drainage ditch along the road. And for a second, no more, he thought. He saw her again, still walking, still whispering. Moving backward, he let the blinds fall shut. The next morning, he didn't say a word about it. They had breakfast at a diner called Jessup's, where the eggs tasted like the griddle hadn't been cleaned since Carter was president. Emily kept quiet too, but she watched the windows. They got back on the road, heading toward his brother's ranch in Bryan. Curtis figured they could make it before noon. He didn't expect to see her again. But just south of Caldwell, Emily gasped. There she is. Curtis slammed the brakes and the truck skidded a little. He followed her pointing finger across the field. A good 100 yards out near a rusted-out tractor, the same woman was moving slowly through the tall grass, backward. Always. Backward. Curtis got out and shouted, "Hey, you need help?" No answer. Just that same rhythm, those slow steps and whispered words. He climbed halfway over the fence before Emily called out, scared, "Dad, don't, please." He stopped, looked back at her. Something in her face twisted his stomach more than Fadenson. The woman ever had. They got back in the truck and drove. They didn't talk much the rest of the day. That night, at the ranch, his brother Ray poured them beers out by the back porch and joked about how Curtis always attracted weirdos. Emily didn't laugh. She went to bed early. But around 1 in the morning, Curtis woke up to the sound of footsteps in gravel. He looked out the window. There she was again. Not in the field, not on the road. In the driveway, walking backward. And this time, her whispering was loud enough to hear. "I left the door open. You didn't come. I left the door open. You didn't come." Over and over. Curtis stood frozen, too afraid to breathe. She walked past the truck, past the swing set, right out of view. The next day, he packed their bags and made some excuse about needing to leave early. Ray didn't argue. On the drive home, Emily didn't speak until they passed the stretch of highway near Elgin. "I don't think she's walking to somewhere," she said. Curtis looked at her. She was staring out the side window, pale and wide-eyed. "I think she's walking through it. Like time's going backward for her." She looked at him then. "And every time we see her, it's later for us but earlier for her." Curtis didn't say anything, but a chill soaked through him that no July heat could burn away. Month later, he started dreaming about her. In one dream, he was standing in the ditch. She passed him slowly, whispering the same words. Only this time, she turned her head as she walked past. Her eyes were white, empty, like marble. And her mouth never stopped moving. "I left the door open. You didn't come." Curtis woke up screaming. Weeks after that, he saw her again. He was alone, heading toward Giddings on business. A flat stretch of road with nothing but corn on both sides. There she was, walking backward through a field, slowly being swallowed by the stalks. He pulled over, got out. And this time, he stepped into the field. Every inch felt wrong. The smell, the air, even the bugs were silent. He didn't see her again, but when he got back to the truck, The inside was ice cold. The dashboard clock blinked. 3:17 a.m. It had been 5:40 when he stepped out. And 50 miles behind him, a trooper found tire tracks on the shoulder near Caldwell. Leading into a ditch and out again. But no sign of a vehicle. No sign of people. Just two barefoot footprints. Backwards. Into the field.